first presenter is Donna Comer in the assessment department.
Maybe we should run through the schedule. So
Oh,
tonight,
would you mind doing that?
yeah,
I'm off
tonight
my
we're gonna
game
have
today.
Donna presenting the assessment budget, then I'll do finance, it'll be followed by human resources by Brayden Connor, the police, parks and recreation, and the justice court. So Donna's gonna kick us off.
Thank you, Paul.
Assessing.
Okay, thank you. Now, what do you want me to do, Paul? Just go through line by line?
You could just hit the highlights, I mean,
Yeah, the highlights. So salaries are determined by contract from the town boards. How about we start on capital purchases, which is the .2 line?
it's good.
Capital purchases, you're in for
It's 0.
0. Yeah, oh, the columns were reversed, yes. So 0. Last year we had budgeted for a copier, it's on order, so thank you for that. And we don't plan to make any capital purchases in 2023.
Maybe you should explain your compensation for employees, because you always have different combinations of part-time and full-time.
A lot of the lines haven't changed that much, have they? What is the most significant change that I see up there is the full-time employees. And we now have on staff a full-time certified New York State residential appraiser. So that is a little bit above what we had on budget last year, and that's the difference there between the 158 and the 165. Okay. Then going down to the contractual expenses. Oh, .2, the computer equipment. That is new. You're going to hear that in probably most of the presentations. Items that used to be in the IT department have been segregated out then into the individual departments, so you can see which departments are now affording which items. So my $5,900 request is part of what I think would have typically been in the IT department. Is that what I'm looking at?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, there's another $5,900. My eyes just fell to my own page here. It's in a different order.
And that includes software licensing fees
And
as well
two
as the cost
PCs.
to replace any computers.
Right. Okay. That was a different place on your page. I'm sorry that I did it.
All right.
Next is memberships, and we're just going to bump that a little bit. We're changing membership fees year upon year. Our deeds are pretty much stable from year over year. Computer expenses, that's generally our toner expenses and that. The 406 this year represents the ongoing maintenance agreement for the new copier that is on order right now. So it's just going to cover our expenses for that one item. Supplies are down a little bit because we had the extra purchases last year, so this is more typical at $2,500. Staff training and conferences is up just because the price of some of our one-day seminars and things have gone up, and I've added a little bit to make sure that our appraiser stays qualified and satisfies the educational requirements for the state of New York. Contractual services for $800. That is an outside vendor that helps us refresh our data from one database to another database so that we can set up the appointment scheduling that we do for our senior citizens and our renewable exemptions. That way we are keeping them socially distanced instead of just letting them form a line at will, as sometimes has happened before COVID. And we find that most people are actually appreciating that service of that scheduler, so thank you for your support in the past in getting that program created for us. This is just the year-upon-year maintenance agreement. Appraisal and legal contractual, that is to afford the attorney's times and other things that come up with the assessment litigation. And that's a reactionary thing. We haven't spent too much last year, so I'm hoping we can spend just a little less. I'm budgeting a little less, hoping it will be just fine. On a reassessment line, these are the types of items that we are affording to try to avoid that $1.7 million figure that we've been talking about. So this is each year we're going to be doing a little bit of something that will cost us a little bit to update our data. Next year we hope to update our neighborhood codes and our land tables. We're working on reviewing all the inventory right now for our commercial properties. And as you know, the assessment roll runs from mid-year to mid-year. So anytime the assessment role includes any kind of a project that's going to involve financing, it will always overlap on two budgets, part in one year, part in another. So this is us just trying to get the expertise and advice in from the outside for things that would have a price tag associated with it that would afford us to get our data situated for a time where we could revalue our properties. The software maintenance contracts is up significantly because we will be taking some of our software as was requested. We have included in this budget hosting agreements for some of the things that our IT department has been doing in-house. So our online image make online on our website is going to be hosted now by the company that gives us that product, as well as some other things. What else did I have in there? I'm asking for some tools which the public can use to verify the data that they have on their homes, and they're going to be attached to our website. So that's one of the price increases there. And we need an additional license now for the sketching software for the appraiser. Yeah, so there's a couple of new softwares there. Vehicle operation lease expense. As you know, we've gone to, Town Board has gone to a fleet management type of philosophy as opposed to straight up ownership of our vehicles. We have one vehicle in our department. The 1800 is anticipatory of next fall acquiring our own through that fleet maintenance process. What we'll be doing in the short term between now and then is taking our very old vehicle and trading that in against some of the new vehicles for other employees. And I'll be acquiring one of their older vehicles, which is newer than mine, to bridge for the next year. And that just kind of gives us the opportunity to put off one vehicle out just one more year.
It's a good plan.
Thank you. And then the maintenance for the $1,000 is to maintain that old vehicle that I'll be having that's a little bit newer than the one I have, but still going to need some maintenance over the course of the year. And then just put a flat 1,000 in there just because I don't know the history on that, what it might need. Any questions I can answer for anyone?
Yeah, so year to year, we have your budget actually decreasing about 3,000. I would call it flat.
Yeah, the only question I had was, can you go to all the other department heads and have them do that? Have a budget for 23 that's a couple $1,000 less than 22?
Mine is much more simplistic compared to other departments. So I'd be happy to share whatever it is you think that I know, but I don't know their budget, so can't guarantee the same result.
Well, you did a nice job with yours.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Don.
Thank
What
you.
year was the last assessment we had in Webster?
2004 was the last townwide revaluation.
When are you projecting another townwide assessment?
We don't have a date on a townwide revaluation, but we are looking at other things that we could do to position ourselves to get there. And until I have that definite approval from the state of New York to do things just a little bit different, which I think will make it much more cost effective and much more palatable to our public. I'm not speaking about that publicly because I want to make sure that I have their blessings and that their input is part of that. But you can look forward to that in future conversations in the very near future.
Okay.
Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, I have memory issues lately. Now, I do know that Bill Abbott is the liaison to assessment.
Yes.
That I know. And we've had conversations, the three of us, about that strategy you have with the state, which I think is a very good strategy to somewhat avoid I hate to use the word shock and awe of a total reval that can upset the community.
Right.
Whatever. That if you get certain acknowledgments from the state, that we may in a near future workshop have and present the strategy that you have and how to execute it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
In no way, shape, or form do I intend to keep anything secretive. We are very transparent in our office. From what I know of all the rules that govern us, I don't know the rules of the other departments very well, but I do find that our department is very transparent by law in so many ways.
Yeah.
And I'm very grateful for that in many ways. So I'll be very happy to educate you. The reason that I'm not saying anything yet is I don't want to start a conversation when we find out that the state says, no, we don't like that plan, and we want you not to go left, please go right, to be vague on purpose. And I don't want people getting excited, and I don't want to make it excitable. The goal is to make it cost effective because the town bears the entire expense of townwide revaluations. The fact that so many years have gone by, that makes it a very high price tag. And as I just described, the budget will, the assessment roll runs mid-year to mid-year, so it will affect 2 budgets, and that alone, if there were no other increases and revenues stayed the same, you would be breaking the tax cap 2 years in a row just to afford that project. I don't think that was ever their intent, and I think that there's other ways that we can do it, and I have really been talking and reaching out to my colleagues in the state and talking to them the last number of years to pull together what would be the solution to that high price tag to the town, and that's our taxpayers, right? When we say the town, I'm looking at a town board that's been elected to govern them, but those are our taxpayers. And it's going to come out of the town tax line. And I just think that there's other ways that we can do it if we're given enough time to make it happen, because time has gone by. We are now fully staffed in our office as of last week.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited and I'm so encouraged, and I am really looking to the future with excitement of what we can do and what we can accomplish with the team that we have put together. And there's a lot of promise here. And what I want to do is involve the public, which is why we're getting the online software for people that are going to be reporting back to us. We'll do a soft launch on that, and then we'll be ready to really engage the public in the activity. As much as possible, we want them to understand it, but it's a very technical process. So we might not be able to educate everyone to the level they wish to, but we're certainly going to be giving it the try.
I don't think you've been properly staffed since I've been back.
Thank you.
Which is going on 4 years.
Yeah, it's been a long time
That
coming.
hurts.
It has been a long time coming, so we've dug a little bit of a hole we need to get out of, and that's going to be, that and COVID is my explanation for the delay. We haven't been able to fill that position, and COVID brought on so many other things we had to do in addition to what we usually do. I really feel like 2023 is going to be the turning point where we're going to be back on track to pick up the thought of that project again.
Well, Braden's going to be here later to do HR at 5 o'clock. It's too bad he's not here right now, because if he was, he might be twitching, because the work that the 2 of you have done the last 2 years in vetting candidates for these positions, then hiring them, and then just the bad luck that they've walked out the door, for good reasons, relocating or whatever, and you just, when you think you've got your staff, or full staff, it's been quite a ride.
It has been.
Yeah.
It has been.
And the last thing I'll say before we hand the baton to Paul, unless the other board members have questions or comments on assessment, is that, if anybody who's watching this live or in the future, if they're like, well, wait a minute, 2004 is the last full rebuild. That's 18 years ago. I'm sure you'll get into that more, in a future date when you present to the town board, but I've looked at that, and there's very rational, logical reasons why that has been.
Mm-hmm.
We won't get into details tonight, but, there's been reasons why.
There has been.
And I think those reasons are getting to the point where they are exhausting themselves, and we can move forward. I like your strategy.
Yes, thank you. Well said. They are exhausting themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Don.
All right, Paul.
All right, we'll talk about finance, and just move over to that screen. My department. Part-time personnel, dropped that from 6 to 3,000. That is, I think there's a possibility we may need help from some former employees. We've used Sandy Stringer parts of this year. Next year, we're actually going to have Carol Capitello, who's retiring. We may need her to come back from time to time to help our new payroll supervisor. Compensation employees, that includes my 4 employees, which is the town accountant, accounts payable clerk and payroll supervisor. As I just said, Carol's going to retire in January after 14 years of service. So there will be some overlap between the new person and Carol in early 2023. And we also have Paula Friedman, who is also an office account clerk. She handles grants and some bill pay responsibilities. She's involved in the construction, letters of credit, and the deposits, which she works closely with engineering and community development. So she's been a good employee for many years as well. Our town accountant is fairly new. She started about a year and a half ago, taking over for Sandy Stringer, who had been here for many years. The capital purchases category, under computer equipment and licensing, as Donna just explained, these items are items that were previously in the IT budget. This year we decided to break them out by department. In my case, it included some Microsoft licenses and the replacement of one computer. So I budgeted $2,750. Under seminars and conferences, that includes attendance to the Association of Towns, GFOA events, not only for myself, but for employees as needed. Fixed asset software, that's up $6,500. The software we're currently using is not integrated with Munis, our main financial software. It's a standalone package. It's pretty outdated, so I put in $6,500 to try to replace it. I don't know if we'll actually go with the Munis module or try to do it with something else, but it's something I would like to look at sometime in early 2023. Financial consultants, that includes fees that we pay to our actuary. The town is required to have our other post-employment benefits valued on an annual basis, and that's basically identifying how much liability the town has for health insurance paid to retirees and some of the other benefits that they receive. And it's a pretty significant number. It also includes Municipal Solutions, who is our bond consultant, so they help us with our bond anticipation borrowings, bond anticipation note borrowings, and our serial bond borrowings. So they work closely with our attorney, Harris Beach, whenever we borrow money. And it also includes Lifetime Benefit Solutions, who handle our HRA and HSA accounts. We pay them on an annual basis to help us out. Office supplies at $5,100 is flat year to year. Machine lease is a copier. Software license fees. That actually is up significantly. It's up $37,000. The town uses Munis, which is the full financial system for payroll, accounts payable, general accounting, budgeting, billing, receivables. It's the whole package. We've decided to, this was a decision that was made with the IT department in conjunction with the town board, we decided to actually allow Tyler Technology, the parent company who owns Munis, to third-party host the data and the software. Now, based on an analysis that Steve Peace's department did, it appears as though, even though it's a jump on my budget, we think overall it's actually going to be a savings for the town. And it also adds a certain level of security. So that process is actually underway, actually as we speak. This week, Munis is actually building the database in our test and train system. So it actually will be available for us to start testing the software in about, actually on Monday. So we'll be able to start testing and test and train. And then the plan is to actually go live with it about the second week in November. So we're moving in conjunction with this third-party hosting. We're actually changing versions from 11.3 to 2021.5, which actually is a jump of about 4 or 5 levels. So it actually will be a pretty big change and a different look to the whole software. The computer system administration charge, that's an annual fee. We also pay to Tyler Technology for system support. It does cover things like they're doing this week, like the data transfer. It's actually covered by this fee. So whenever there's an upgrade, it will be covered. Then I budgeted $3,000 for software conversion costs. As I just explained, we are switching to version 2021.5. So I do have some training scheduled for this year, but I budgeted $3,000 for some additional training as needed. As I said, it will be a big change. And the other expenditure item is the amount that we pay to our independent audit firm. We do use Michael Metzger and Barr to do the annual financial audit for the town. In addition, they do some agreed upon procedure engagements for both the court and the town clerk and receiver of taxes. It also includes some money for a single audit. A single audits are required whenever the town spends over $750,000 of federal funds. And it looks like 2023 we will be over that amount because of the ARPA money, which we are designating both to the grants that we did a couple of weeks ago and $2.5 million to the wastewater treatment plant project, phase 2. We'll probably put us over that 750 for 2023. So that's about it for finance. Any questions, comments?
Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Paul.
Yep. All right, next up we have HR. Right on time.
Hey, he's moving up to the podium. One thing I will say about this, Paul, that software license fees, which we had some town board workshops and discussions on this in the last month or two that kind of explain it. That is one of those items where the one-year budget process in government doesn't do justice to the savings that it does for an organization over a 1 to 5 year period.
That is correct.
So, anyway, that's it. Trades at the podium.
All right, Honorable Town Board, the 2023 proposed human resources budget is maintenance of effort, $144,000, $125. It is $525 higher than the current budget, which is the equivalent of 0.4%. So I consider that to be tax cap compliant. And that's one of the things that I like to pride myself on is not increasing overhead expenses, although sometimes it's required. As with most customer service facing agencies, our largest expense is personnel, being me, that personnel. Other than that, everything else is pretty much the same. I would point out, I ran a couple of numbers for this discussion. So in the last 12 months, we've been very busy with recruitment, and I would say more so than it would appear to be historical. I didn't have a chance to pull data, kind of over a long historical period, but in the last 12 months, we've held 25 recruitments for positions. We've hired 135 employees, and of that, only 55 were seasonal. So that's 75 permanent hires in the last 12 months. And we conducted 265 civil service transactions, which would be inclusive of hire, terminate, promote, make permanent, position change as well. So that 135 hires, we have 355 employees total as of today on payroll. That breaks down into 217 part-time, of which 55 are seasonal. So right now in July with summer camp, this is really our high water mark because we have all the camp counselors employed at this point. But they are only 55, so keep in mind that the seasonal variation isn't that huge. 148 full-timers that break down into 51 in the blue-collar union, 37 in the white-collar union, 32 non-union, and 28 police professionals. So I just thought I would provide some indicators of what we've been doing, which is basically a lot of recruitment, onboarding, and processing employees. With that, I'm open to any questions that you have about any particular line items or my approach to the submitted budget.
I have none. Thank you.
No question.
That's quite a volume of hires.
Thank you, Paul, because I wrote as fast as you did.
Yeah, I couldn't capture it all. I appreciate that.
Brady, let me ask you this. If I understand it correctly, we have 148 full-time personnel in town. We have 217 part-time, 55 of those are seasonal. You said that the recruitment, placement, vetting, all that very robust process in the last year has resulted in 75 permanent position hires?
Yes, correct.
That's 50% of our full-time staff.
Permanent includes permanent part-timers as well.
Okay.
So it's,
Yeah.
but it is to say that the majority of that 135 are different from just the seasonal summer process, to give it some context. So if I didn't give it context, you know, a logical conclusion would be is, yeah, every summer we staff up, every fall kids go back to school, normal process. You know, I don't know if it's a generational thing, whether it's the overall economy, but there has certainly been, a lot of turnover, and turnover is just a number. It, depending on the circumstances, it can be a bad thing, or it can be a great thing. But it is a thing that requires time and effort, and hopefully we're doing a good job at meeting the hiring goals of the departments that I serve, as well as the overall talent and quality of the workforce, which I think is very good, just for anecdotal feedback.
Well, that makes more sense, because there's 310 full-time and permanent part-time employees, so 75 in the last year is more like a little under 25%. And I know COVID, we've seen why a lot of people are leaving, they're retired in many cases. Okay. That's all I got.
Changing of the guard, as they say. We have a lot of new hires, and I think the board's done a wonderful job in the manner in which we have interviewed. And we made some great selections of new department heads. I really enjoy the process. I think it's a very, very, very good process, and we're seeing what has developed since we implemented that process with the people that have been hired, with the exception of you, of course.
Are you pointing at
There's
Brady?
always a bad.
No, I'm pointing at you.
Me? Oh, well, yeah, well, don't get me going on the fact that elections are just popularity contests. It doesn't mean you have the skills when you get hired by the community. Braden, all jokes aside, I gotta tell you something. I for one, am very happy you're sitting in the seat you've been sitting in for almost 2 years to help and navigate this organization through what 9 new department heads?
Yeah.
You know, and you gotta hire smart, and part of hiring smart is the robust process that you vet candidates and all that, and I wanna thank you for what you brought to this organization, and appreciate it.
I second that, sir.
Thank you.
He is a very witty person. I want to throw that in there.
Yeah, that's Lisa's concern. Huh?
I was just gonna say thank you sincerely, and I continue to really enjoy working here and the people that work in this organization, so I'm very happy.
Thank you, sir.
Good to hear.
Well, tell ya, Chief, that's a tough act to follow, isn't it?
Can I stay here or you want me up there? I'll go up there.
unless camera-wise,
Not sure we can
You
see
could
that
stay
screen.
right
yeah, don't, okay.
That was police.
Afternoon, everyone. So overall speaking, we have a 0 headcount increase budget. The majority of the changes to the budget are just to reflect cost percentage increases, mostly through the supply chain. But we'll kind of go through this line by line just to give you some of the major talking points. Obviously, as Brayden pointed out, a large component of my budget is headcount for personnel. So that experiences an increase of 117,931. 25,000 of that is due to the new captain's position. About 71,000 of that is due to contractual step increases, and the remainder of that is the contractual percent increase negotiated by the town board with the collective bargaining agreement. So that has our head count at 34 sworn, actually 33 out of that line item, that would be the 34th, 4 civilian and 1 part-time. The next couple lines appear to have increases and decreases, and there is a little bit of a change, but the major changes here are to reflect accounting practices. One of the issues we had with the way holiday pay, overtime, and now a new comp buy-down line were being accounted for before. It made it hard to track how those were being expended. Essentially, going back a couple years, the overtime, the comp buy-down came out of the overtime line, so we would be tracking on course to be under budget on overtime, and then in December, when the contractual buy-down happened, it would essentially be a balloon payment. So what we've done is we separated that out to be its own line item to make sure that that's accounted for appropriately. For overtime, generally speaking, there was a $25,000 increase requested. That has to do with the increase in rate for the officers that are working. So we don't anticipate the hours reducing, but the rate that we're paying them is increasing. So there's a slight increase to that budget line. We inserted a new budget line called police reimbursed overtime. I'm anticipating that at about $50,000. Any expenditure out of that line would be reimbursed on the revenue side. So that's not an increase in budget. It's a line item to account for any charged overtime in relation to like special events and things like that. Again, that's still an ongoing conversation with the board as far as how that's going to be implemented through the fee schedule. But for the budget process, I'm using the $50,000 mark based on the analysis we did during the last discussion on event costs. Clerical salaries, again, no increase in head staff there, or head count there for staff. Overtime is minimal, and that's more to reflect as needed. Clerical part-time is just to reflect, it's not exactly clerical part-time, that's our 1 part-time employee we have to assist with fleet coordination. Crossing guards, we still have a responsibility of Clem North and Clem South to have crossing guards posted for morning and afternoon. So there's only 1 location that's still active. We have responsibility there. The next 2 line items, tobacco compliance and SRO overtime, are both reimbursed. So again, they appear as expenditures on this portion of the budget, but they would be completely reimbursed on the revenue side for any expense out of that. And again, there's a increase there, more so based on the request that we've been getting from the school to have officers assist with events. So we have a process in place where any request from the school to have police officers present for overtime is billed to the school district, and that would be reflected in that line item. The computers is a new cost center approach, obviously the town undertook, so that $23,000 increase reflects shifting the other previous year's expenses to the departments. So that's our anticipated annual subscription cost and equipment cost. What that reflects are the approximately 40 users we have for licensing, and then doing a 4-year rotation on hardware to replace the current equipment that we have. No significant increases in the next few line items for capital purchases. Obviously, vehicles is a major talking point. Our fleet consists of 13 patrol vehicles and then the 6 administrative vehicles. Our patrol vehicles, we average about 30,000 miles a year on. So that puts us basically on a 4-year replacement cycle for the vehicles. So that essentially means a minimum of 3 vehicles a year for replacement. The reduction in that line is to reflect the anticipation of 2 of those being patrol and not having a setup cost that we saw last year. As I continue down, there are no real significant changes there. Office expenses, telephone, miscellaneous. So most of these are slight increases due to supply chain increases in cost of goods. The other major increase that I made is kind of a guesstimate, fuel cost. As you see, it went from $60,000 this year to a estimated $120,000 for next year. That may be a little bit of an overestimation. Year to date, we're at $44,126 on our fuel cost for the police department. So I anticipate at the rate that the fuel expense is grown, that we are going to exceed the $60,000 this year, but it's a little bit hard to project what that number will be. So I anticipated $120,000 for next year, not knowing how that expense is going to work through. Again, clothing expenses took a little bit of an increase there as well, mostly due to supply chain issues and ballistic vest replacement. We're on a 5-year cycle for ballistic vests. That's manufacturer certified date, so every year we have a rotation of vests that need to be cycled out that coincide with officers being hired. So essentially what that does, it gives us an approximately $275,865 increase from 2022 to 2023 if you remove the reimbursed line items. And of that, the officer salary increase is approximately 43%, and fuel is approximately 21%. So those are the significant cost increases. Any questions?
I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
I know that we had talked about previously overtime for the police officers covering special events. And I believe I just heard you say that we're still having conversations with respect to the fee schedule. So where's the revenue being tracked right now for, say, the carnival, any school events, and those sorts of things? And specifically the carnival, was there an agreement or discussions that took place with the fire department regarding coverage?
Yes, sir. So currently anything related to the school district is billed through the current agreement we have with the school district for the SRO reimbursement process.
Even if it's a non-SRO?
Correct, yes. If they request 3 officers, say for a school event,
Right.
we account for all of that expense through that billing process. For the fire department, the carnival in particular, there was a standing agreement with the fire department that they would pay a $3,000 flat fee for police presence and cost of overtime at the carnival. I looked back at some history of that, and there wasn't necessarily consistency of that being applied. This year, I re-engaged that conversation, and we came to an agreement of a $4,000 flat fee that they were going to pay for overtime related to the event. That doesn't reflect the total cost But in the absence of the board voting on the fee structure that we're having discussions on going forward as to who's getting charged what dollar amount, I felt it appropriate to increase it from what the previous agreement was to cover some of the additional costs that we saw, and have some sort of reimbursement there. So there's a written agreement signed by the fire department. The overtime cost has been provided to finance, who is now billing the fire department for that expense.
So what percentage of the overtime for those officers was covered by that $4,000?
A little over 50%. The total cost, and again, so this isn't direct cost because some of that overtime was taken in comp time, but the total cost for overtime for the 4 days of the carnival, including the parade, was about $7,700. So the flat fee of $4,000 covered a little over 50%. And looking historically, that was in line with what has happened previously. Under other carnival details, the overtime was between $600 and $7,500 based on what I saw. That wasn't billed consistently. So that was paid by the fire department in probably 2 of the last 4 years that it was held and not paid other years. I can't speak to why that's the case or the historical aspect of that, but the charge to them has been about 50% of the total overtime expended based on what I saw.
So the cost has stayed relatively the same even when they had special police coverage, right?
Correct. And so the only real change this year for us in coverage was the actual parade itself, which overlapped with the pre-existing detail that we had in place. So, and again, when it comes to public events, as part of the discussion we're having, it depends on the event and the timing of the event. The example would be the Memorial Day parade cost $0 overtime because it's a daytime weekday parade where we had available staffing to do that without costing overtime. When you have evening events or weekend events, we don't have the same on-duty staffing that we can flex to cover that. So
Right.
It really depends on the type of event moving forward.
I was just using the carnival as an example, and I appreciate you presenting the historical information. I think it brings to light that we have historically been paying approximately $6,000 to $7,000, or billing, or that's what the charge was to the taxpayers for the overtime coverage, even in the years when we did in fact have the special police there.
Correct.
So.
Well, and John, I'll add just a little bit more color to that. 2 things is that, and Paul just said you've been back for 4 years. There was no Fireman's Carnival in 20 and 21 because of COVID. When we looked back in 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, that was 5 years of Fireman Carnivals. We had 3 invoices, 3 of the 5 years, we billed the fire department $3,000 for that overtime. 2 of those times they paid us, 1 time they didn't, and the town wrote it off. 2 of those 5 years, we didn't bill the fire department. We really can't figure out why that schematic was in place. So putting it in a different way, because it would be easy to have a narrative where, well, this, without the special police, this cost us more. Well, Chief just showed how the overtime for the police has been the same, really, during the 15 through 19, and then this 22. The difference is that compared to those previous 5 years, we did bill for the $4,000, half of it, and we'll get it. And I want to give Dolly McGuire, our town clerk, a lot of credit because I think, Chief, when you talked to the fire department, you were able to show a resolution from this town board circa 2006 that really guided how the carnival was going to be handled between the fire department and the police. And this happens with organizations when turnover of personnel. Why that resolution, that local law, whatever, was not followed in 15 through 19, I don't know. But it was nice to pull that out as a reference point when you were able to talk with the fire department, so that's a little more color to that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. I like my documentation, don't I, Chief?
You do, sir. Absolutely.
The other question I had, I'm sorry, I'm not allowed another one.
You can ask as many as you want, we're out of schedule it.
So, I believe the other town departments they've signed on to the vehicle leasing. And what is the police department's position on that, joining along with that company as far as leasing goes?
Yeah, so the conversation has been going on for a while. The initial proposal that they provided included the marked fleet as well as the unmarked fleet. I worked with Paul to look through the formulas and kind of refine the proposal to see if it would work for the police department. And it, on its face, didn't appear to be a cost savings with the marked fleet. So what we've done is we've asked for an evaluation on the unmarked fleet to see if there's a potential cost saving there. Part of the issue with the marked fleet is the rotation of the vehicles with the vehicle setup. It's not just the striping and the lights, it's the cages, it's the MDT, the weapons mounts, all of the other configuration that goes into it. The setup cost is significant each time we rotate a vehicle. So when we looked at that, again, I don't want to quote a number off the top of my head, but over the 10-year program life, the savings was minimal. And it didn't seem that it would be prudent to transition the entire program. That quote on the administrative side has been delayed with the turnover in the police department staff. It's one of the things that's on our action items to take care of. But we'll have to see what the proposal is based on the unmarked fleet, not the total fleet.
Kenny?
Any comments on special police or animal control?
So I guess the things to highlight for the animal control, we're taking a collaborative approach to the animal control. There isn't a single full-time employee. There's a collection of part-time employees. One is focused on the administration of the unit and reestablishing the police department and doing the hiring of other part-time on-call personnel. So we have currently 4 part-time employees under the animal control functioning, and the majority of that is for on-call. So there isn't really any significant changes to the budget. I just figured I'd highlight the approach we're taking now that it's moved back under the police department for administration. For the special police, obviously, this will be the first year that there'll be no line items for the special police as far as a taxable expense.
Jenny? No?
Where does the brand new vehicle go?
So far, none of the assets have been transferred. So I've been working through for accountability of special police items. There's still there's about 6 radios that we're still looking to identify before we do asset transfers. So I've been working with finance to account for everything that's on their asset list. And then it'll come to the board for your approval on moving the assets. The intention is all of the vehicles and trailers, usable equipment, the request is going to be that it gets transferred to the police department for use. Essentially, all of the functioning it was intended for, we're still doing. It's designed to assist with traffic control, public events, and that's all still a responsibility of the police department. So that will be the request when it comes to the board. And then there's a number of items that just built up over time that can be surplus and disposed of. So once I have accountability of all the items that are listed, then it'll come to the board shortly for your direction.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
No questions, thank you, Chief.
The only question I have, it might be more of a Paul question. This is kind of one of my pet peeves of mine is that I want to make sure whatever we present on the screen and whatever, that there's not another slide that contradicts what we just showed. Because then that gets confusing for the board, it gets confusing for the citizens. With that preface, I took a look at a presentation that's going to be done later this afternoon, and it had the police department as an annual cost to the town of Webster taxpayers of $7 million. But this budget is showing about $4.5 million. Why would, is that because of benefits, Paul?
Yeah, the benefits are later in the budget.
Okay,
At the tail end of general fund, about here. And the police benefits are mixed in to retirement contribution, Social Security. Cash option, hospitalization, medical insurance, retiree medical insurance, dental insurance,
yeah.
HSA, HRA for retirees and active.
And I know,
It's
Paul,
mixed in.
what's that?
It's mixed in with our other benefits.
I understand it, I just want to make sure, because obviously, you know, maybe I'm overthinking this. If I'm watching this at home, live, or in attendance, or I watch a tape in the future, and I'm like, huh, Chief showed a budget that is, proposed for 2023 at 4.8 million, and then once you get the revenues that you get, it actually is down to 4.6 million. How can that be when a presentation later on is using as a point of reference, 7 million is what the police department costs? I don't know, and I'm not trying, this is not a gotcha question, I want to make sure that it is that accurate? Is it?
Yeah.
No, I mean, is it 7 million?
Yeah, it's accurate.
Okay.
Yeah,
I feel better.
Just my 2 cents on that.
Yeah.
For people to understand, the retirement contribution to the state is a mandated percentage that the state provides the town. I'd say that it's approximately 30% of their salary is
Sure.
part of the, and it depends on which tier the employees are in. So we have a mix of tier 2 and tier 6 employees that contribute to that. And then the healthcare obviously is through the collective bargaining with the union and part of consortium.
Yeah, and Chief, I'll tell you this, we could go back to the previous 3 presentations today and take their bottom line budget and say, well, that's not really 500,000 for assessment because it's more like 800,000 because of what Paul is showing.
Yeah.
But no one's doing a presentation later on referencing the assessment budget.
Yeah, no, and I get that. And really what it comes down to is it's part of the discussion of long-term management of personnel, retention of people beyond 20 years, so that the retirement contributions aren't starting to stack and
Sure.
it becomes manageable, stays manageable. So that's part of the long-term management of the organization.
Well, Chief, I'll tell you what, we let off with some softballs, the first 3. I hope that assessment, finance, and human resources doesn't take that out of context, but they're lower dollar budgets, and they were relatively flat. You came in as 4th, and, the police department, everybody knows this, it's a larger budget, and there's an increase. I appreciate the way you explained it, and I guess this is as good a time as ever to say to anybody in attendance or watching at home, today's July 28th. These are proposed budgets for 23. It's a month and a half out before we adopt a preliminary budget. Is that correct, Paul?
That's about right, Tom.
Okay, so,
Yeah, and I guess the only thing I just wanted to add there is, like I said earlier this week in a different interview, public safety is a resource-intensive expenditure for a town, for any municipality. More so for public safety because of the 24/7 coverage. It's not just a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 business hours department. It's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. So for people to understand that, if you take 18 patrol officers, that's 6 assigned to each platoon, which is 8-hour shifts covering 24 hours. Not all 6 can work at the same time. There has to be a staggering of those employees so that they're there 7 days a week and have days off in between. So it is a little bit more comprehensive than just having a unit that's there Monday through Friday. So I just make that clear.
thanks, Chief.
Yeah.
Anything else? No?
He's nice.
All right. Well, Chris, that's a tough act to follow, isn't it, Chris?
Do my best.
Chris Final. Parks and Recreation.
Okay. Couple of notes just before I get started. The overall budget for the department does not have any additional staff changes to our current department structure, so there's no additional headcount or any change to that. Overall, I know Tom, you said at the beginning, to keep things flat over the three departments out of all the account lines that we have, the budget from an expense standpoint is up $54,000, and our revenue over the three is just under $9,000 less than we had in 22, and I'll go over that some more in detail as we go through. Just as a update for 2022, just to kind of give you a 6-month benchmark as to where we are. Currently, we are about 48% of our expense, so we're under that 50% threshold halfway through the year, which is obviously where we like to be. And our revenue is over that 50%, which is obviously good. We're at about 64% collected. So from a ratio, that's a very positive thing. I will start out with the program for the aging, which is our senior department. It's probably the easiest one that I have to go through. Really, there's no major changes within our expense. The only major change that we have in this is our provision line, which has been reduced by about $8,000. That's a direct result of just participation numbers continue to sort of stay level after COVID, so we don't see the number of participation that we had in years past. That also shows on the revenue side where we have a reduction in revenue from $60,000 down to $50,000. The only other highlight I'll change to this is we now also have our senior program personnel now is correctly structured. For the last few budget cycles, we had people in different lines. So now we have Daphne Gioka, who is our recreation supervisor. She's coming directly out of the program for 18 months. Onto recreation. I'm not going to go through every one of these lines. I'm going to hit a number of the larger lines or anywhere. I think there's got to be some explanation as to why there's some changes. First one is 10087. It's our administrative support part-time. We do have a slight reduction in that, around $7,000. That's a result of the new staff structure that we have in place in our front office that our office manager, Colleen Ferguson, has implemented, so we've been able to see some savings there. Our seasonal personnel line, 10097, we do have an increase in that. Again, that's basically based on minimum wage, as that continues to drive our cost. As been explained through the other presentations, 20011, our computer equipment and licensing, that is our software cost for 9 full-time and part-time computer licensing. That also includes one new kiosk or new computer for our front-end kiosk. So that's a new budget line for us. We do have an expense in there for fitness equipment capital cost of $23,000. That's for new equipment for the fitness center, specifically spin bikes, as we try to jumpstart our fitness membership and continue to build on that. We do have the need for additional programs to be able to offer, and obviously that is one that we hear time and time again from our members and potential members that they'd like to see offered. 40067, this is, as Paul mentioned earlier in his presentation, from the computer tech support. This $19,000 now is for our registration system, which is Vermont Systems. Vermont Systems is the parent company of RecTrack, which is where all of our registration goes through. This is now housed in the cloud. This has been successfully done thanks to the town board's approval. Now this is being done and managed in the cloud. And I will say in the last 2 months, we have had 0 glitches with RecTrack, and every one of the updates has been done without any issues or conflicts, no downtime. So we've seen a much better system now that is done through the cloud. 40226, custodial supplies. This is a slight increase as we now have moved into the facility stage of purchasing supplies for both town hall and court. 227, day trips. From a cost standpoint, this is being driven by fuel and also from the school district, the cost for bus drivers. So we are seeing an increase in that. We are seeing several of our trip locations changing their price structure. So as they continue to increase, the staff is looking at alternative ways to be able to save those costs with different trips. 40300, that's refuse pickup. This was a contract that was up this year, so we had to renew. We did go out, received several quotes, and we ended up with the lowest quote that we did take actually stayed with Waste Management. The good news is this is now including recycling for our facility, which is again something that we had a very big, I'll say, request for within the facility. So now we do have a recycling option within the facility, and Waste Management takes care of that for us. 40752, utilities, natural gas is a large jump. This is really just a clerical error more than anything. That $24,000 is about on par with what we would normally pay. However, in the past, in the budget cycle, this has just been covered in different areas. So this year, we decided to put it all back together and put it all in one line. So that's why that jumped from about 5,000 to 24.
Natural gas is up substantially
Right. So,
as part of it.
and you'll see that in the park side as well. From a revenue side, on the program side, 2003, that's our program line. We've increased that by 10,000. Just over the last 2 years, that program line has increased just about $40,000. The staff has done a fantastic job of programming as well as increasing our exposure. So we've been able to hit the mark the last 2 years. So increasing it by another 10,000 seems very reachable. Remaining lines pretty much stayed flat or had slight increases. We really didn't have a lot of change to those lines, as I think they've we've adjusted those to where they seem to be the most realistic at this point. 2035 fitness classes and 2045 fitness memberships. Those are the two that we're still trying to, track and be able to get an understanding of where we're at. 2035, the fitness class line, we reduced by about 10,000. In 2045 fitness membership, we reduced by about 10,000. Currently, we're at about 370 membership units that are billed on a monthly basis. Just for a reference, to show that our growth is going, our low point, just as COVID was beginning, was around 230. So again, we're not going back at a fast clip, but we are growing back. And again, as I've shared with this board over time, there is a ceiling that I think we're going to reach, especially with the loss of the Xerox campus and employees at that facility. There is a ceiling that I don't think we're going to be able to reach as high as what it once was when Xerox was at its peak, so to speak. That's it for rec. We'll move on to parks. 2011, that's the computer equipment licensing. That takes care of 3 staff. We have 3 staff that have computer needs between our parks director, foreman, and our facilities. 20059, this is our capital improvements. This is down this year. We don't have as many capital improvements. We really have only 2 major projects that we've scheduled. One is for the replacement of the exterior doors at Liberty Lodge. Last year, the town board approved the capital improvement for exterior doors at Curry Building, and those are actually being done. I think it's in the next 2 weeks. So next year, we had identified Liberty Lodge to have 2 new exterior doors put in, along with some funds put together or put aside for park signage. Again, as I've explained to the town board, it's the hope that we start to sort of change the look of our park signage, not only entrance signs, but park signs within. So we've got some money dedicated for that. 20063 is capital purchase of equipment. We just have one piece of equipment we're looking to replace. That's our infield groomer. It's about $27,000. That infield groomer maintains and takes care of the 7 softball fields that we have on our 2 campuses between Chiota and Kent Park. That machine currently is 10 plus years old. It's on its 2nd engine. That engine has 1,000 plus hours. And during the months of May, June, July, August, and September, it runs 5 days a week, some days 7 days. 20064, that is our capital purchase park improvement line. That is stayed consistent. That is where we use for any of the items within any of the parks that we may have that require capital purchase, we're able to use it from that, so we've left that alone, and I believe that was initiated from the sale of basketball. 40101, as has been explained with some of the other presentations, that is the vehicle lease expense. This is for a new vehicle for our facilities department. For the last, since we've had facilities, we've sort of been, I'll say, vehicle sharing with our park staff, and it's left our park staff short on a number of days where we've had to send people out either in Kubota or just drop people, which we don't like to do because we like to have access to a vehicle. So this will allow us to have a dedicated work van set for our facility staff, so that way they're wherever they need to be, they'll be able to have a vehicle and also the equipment stored within. 40300, that's the refuse pickup, same as what I indicated earlier. This is on the park side. Our parks revenue, lodges are slightly up as we see continued growth in rentals, so we raised that slightly to 105,000. At this point, I don't see any significant revenue from sale of equipment. We don't anticipate having any vehicles go to auction. We do have some equipment that will be going to auction in 23. We don't anticipate, like we did last year, of having our tractor go to auction, which will be going later this fall. But we don't have any large equipment that we anticipate going, just small equipment. The only other thing that I will bring up that I wanted to make sure I noted on here, one of the recommendations that I'm going to have to the town board is the tennis courts that are at Chiota. Those are the original tennis courts that are at Chiota. They've been there since my days of working at Xerox. And there's been some minor refurbishing to those courts. Those are the only 2 tennis courts that we have in town that the town maintains. Those are the only 2 outdoor courts that we have for pickleball, and as this town board, I'm sure, has heard, pickleball is an extremely popular sport in this town. So the courts are becoming, I don't want to say unplayable, but they're getting to the point that they're past repair. So it's my recommendation that in 23 we look at utilizing the Parkland Trust Fund to be able to do a refurbishment of those courts, both for tennis and pickleball, for a new surface and new fencing.
And that is actually in the budget. It's in the Parkland Trust Fund, transferred to Capital Projects Fund. So as of right now, it's in there.
Question?
No, but I mean, and we had a precedent on this with the gym floor and the gym, right?
Yes,
That
yeah.
we went through the research with the state and all that, and Parkland Trust Fund could be used for that because of a lot of different technicalities that all slotted, so it could be used for those types of things. Yep. I don't have any questions.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep, thanks, Chris. Next up, we have the Justice Court. Tom and David.
I got excited when he talked about court getting refurbished, but then I realized.
This guy. This guy.
Wait all time?
Actually, we got new chairs for the court through the JCAP program, so that was very, very nice. So we're plasticized now. Justice's salary is up to you guys. Court clerks, we've got both the full-time and the part-time. If you note, what we did was we went from 2 full-time and 3 part-time to 3 full-time and 2 part-time with the retirement of one of our part-timers. This is something that we've talked about over the years, and every year it seemed like for a long time we were preparing for it, waiting for it, and preparing for it, and then we decided, well, this is getting goofy, so we'll take it out, and of course as soon as you take it out, you need it. But it's something that we have always talked about getting back to, and we're happy we're here. with the addition of Lynn in place of Kim, but Lynn as a full-timer and Kim had gone from full-time with all sorts of knowledge to part-time with all sorts of knowledge. So if you look at that, you've got really about the swap of money going out of the part-time and into the full-time. Overtime is generally something that nobody takes except for compensation, whatever you call that comp time. So we do budget in case somebody takes it. It does happen, but you can see that we're low so far this year. The court security was really a part of a year calculation for going with either payment of special police and then turning it into the later where you get to number 40057 is talking about the court security contract with the armed security. The capital purchases, realistically, last year we calculated for 2 copiers because one especially was making unusual noises, and it seemed to me as if it was time to replace that. It's taken a fair time. We're actually waiting for one to come in, but only one is, in my mind, on its last legs. So the other 1,500 is for this coming year, 2023. It's a black and white Xerox copier, which we look forward to having. The one that will replace is the one that's in the courtroom for now, and then later it'll be the one in the clerk's room. It'll be interesting because it does count the number of copies, and we may be able to get reimbursed per copy from New York State. So that'll be an interesting, probably not money-making venture, but getting a few shekels back. Computer equipment and software licenses, that's new. It's kind of an out of the IT budget and into our budget type of thing. 6 licenses at the $350, 1 computer at the $1,400, gives you that $3,500. So yes, it's added, it's $3,500 more than we haven't had in our budget before. That's because it was taken out of the IT budget. Justice seminars and conference expenses, as you should have taken the hint by now. I'm departing, I will depart very soon after the beginning of the year. So whoever the new justice is won't have 35 years of experience and will need to attend some training. It is mandatory for all judges, but you might find that a new judge will appreciate as much training as possible. And the same thing with Lynn, the latest clerk that we brought on. Court interpreter expenses are reimbursed by Monroe County, so it comes and it goes, and it's not going to disappear because it really is zero. The court security, this is a calculation as it's set out there. Well, I don't know, maybe it's set up somewhere. Anyway, $45 per hour per person for armed service. Because we use the metal detector, my understanding is that is a requirement. When you've got people going through the metal detector, you need to have 2 armed if they are armed at all. And then we're trying to be rational in our best usage of when to have those guards. And so if you calculate it out, you come out with about $56,000 a year. We're budgeting $50,000 because we don't think we'll use it for each and every piece of what we do. Credit card charges are actually covered by New York State. That's really an old budget line situation there. Office supplies, a hair of an increase. It tends to be, we do not run out and try and buy all sorts of stuff to wipe out our budgeted amount. We spend money for what we need. When we do order it, we order enough to get the best price. But some years you're a hair over, some years you're a hair under, and in COVID times, you're almost wiped out, so. Copier and computer maintenance, hopefully with the new copiers, jumping that from 250 to 400, hopefully will not be needed, but we'll see how that goes. I think with the new one, we should be able to dodge the bullet on what in the world was that noise coming out of the copier repair guy. I think that's it in terms of our expenses. In terms of our revenue, we are anticipating 170,000. I haven't looked. I'm assuming nobody's seeing something crazy. I assume you'll let me know if you see something crazy. But we're anticipating 170,000 for revenue. Even though we are now into July, the amount that the town gets from the state is behind typically by 2 to 3 months. So the extrapolation seems that we'll be close to 170. It may be in the 160,000 range, but that's the best shot we can take. Any questions?
Jenny?
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Bill?
No,
Okay. Hey, Chief, as long as we have you here, and, what sticks out in the court budget is the big change in the last couple of years is paid security. And really an offshoot of that, it's not just paid security, it's armed security.
Yep.
And Chief, I know you were very helpful in getting some, the consultant, the sheriffs, the jailer association to come in and do an assessment. This really is spawned off of really the last 2.5 years. That court security has changed drastically in the last 2.5 years. I don't know of any other courts in Monroe County that have unarmed security.
Off the top of my head, I don't recall who's armed or who's not. I know for us, it became an issue when special police expressed safety concerns over it, so that put us into a position of analyzing it. So like you said, we utilized the Monroe County Sheriff's Court Bureau to come out and do an assessment of the court and the process that we use. And then we took their recommendation and tried to make a best practice for our operation. So,
Right.
Essentially, like the judge highlighted, a weapon screening station increases the staffing best practice to 2 people. So it may not be appropriate for all of the court process, but if that process is in place, then that's where that requirement comes from.
And I know as we were navigating this, I was getting calls on certain days from the public defender's office and the DA's office with concerns that their ADAs had said, hey, we're not comfortable being in the Webster court where the security is unarmed.
I think there was, during that period of time, there was no security. The special police were not there at all. So we were on our own, other than, and at some point in time, Webster Police, based on that complaint, did send, an officer for some of our criminal dockets. But probably, I don't want to say for 3-4 months, at least, we had no security whatsoever, and the initial complaint was from the assistant district attorney at that time. Felt very uncomfortable that people were coming and going and there was no security at all.
It's an interesting question too. I mean, you take out the metal detector and say, well, good, we don't need as much money now for an armed security, or you keep it in, then it costs you more, but are you more safe?
The tenor of the times kind of dictates what you have to do.
The tenor of the times, Judge, and I mean, that is, in 2019, you educated me on this. Certain people were showing up to court, escorted, I'll call it, by the sheriff's department with nice chains, not like that you buy at the store around your neck, but like chains, from jail. those same people now get appearance tickets and are walking into court.
If we're lucky.
Okay. Without further ado, we'll start with Dolly McGuire, who is our town clerk and the official title is tax collector? Dolly?
Receiver.
Tax receiver. That sounds a lot better, doesn't it? Yeah. We'll go ahead.
Okay, so I'll start with the tax collection portion of the budget. In regard to personnel, there are 3 employees in this department. There is a part-time tax clerk, a part-time clerk, and a full-time tax clerk. Under computer equipment and licensing, this is a new line item. I'm requesting replacement of 2 computers that are currently 6 years old, and this figure also includes 3 Microsoft Office licenses. Printing and postage is for school and property taxes. There is an increase of $2,650. This looks like a larger increase than it actually is. In the past, when the school district reimbursed the town for tax collection expenses, the reimbursement was applied to the expense line item. Moving forward, the reimbursement will be posted as a revenue. In regards to department expenses, which include supplies, equipment, maintenance, and legal notices, again, for the same reason, reimbursement from the school district will be posted as revenue instead of applying it to the expense. That's why we're seeing that increase. Under the revenue portion of that, interest and penalties on taxes, there's a decrease of $5,000. Based on the last couple of years of collection, interest and penalties on taxes is closer to $180,000. So then under town clerk department, town clerk staffing is comprised of a full-time deputy clerk, a full-time licensed fees clerk, and a part-time receptionist. So if you're looking at the part-time personnel line item and the town clerk personnel, compensation employees, you'll see an increase in part-time personnel and a decrease in compensation employees. Last year you approved the hiring of a full-time receptionist. That did not happen. We did interview, but we were unable to find anyone interested in working full-time. We did, however, find someone that was willing to work part-time. That's working out well, so we've returned to keeping the position part-time and backfilling with the town clerk staff. Computer equipment and licensing, again, this is another new line item. I'm requesting replacement of 4 computers. We have 2 computers that are 4 years old, 1 computer that's 7 years old, and 1 computer that's 8 years old. And the figure also includes 5 software licenses. Under printing and advertising, this includes legal notices and general code supplements. There's a decrease of $1,500. This amount was reduced based on the last 2 years of activity. Postage is postage for all the departments within the town. Decrease of $3,600. I reduced the amount based on the last year's activity, and also I allocated tax postage under tax collection. Office supplies and records management, no change. There's a slight increase to machine, computer, and contractual, a slight increase to payroll time recording software, no change to subscription and publications, and that's actually, that line item is used for general e-code, and that's the electronic version of the town code found on the town's website. Slight increase for conference and transportation, decrease of $525 for easy passes. We saw a spike in the purchase of easy passes when the toll booths were first removed, but now we find these purchases are leveling off. Under revenue, you're going to see a lot of increases and decreases in each line item. That's because revenues have been reclassified based on the state comptroller's chart of accounts. But overall, there's an increase of $2,375, which is mostly due to recognizing the school district's tax collection reimbursement as a revenue. And then under elections, you'll find there are no expenses or revenues listed this year, or for 2023, and that's because the county has now taken over this function. Anyone have any questions?
Oh, no, the budget was pretty flat year to year, so.
Nice job, Val.
Thank you.
Comment and a question, real quick. When you described the pretty robust research that was done by rating you for a full-time receptionist and how it all played out, one thing that you're not noting is as a team player, Dolly, you worked out something where you went to part-time with that, and gave that full-time position, if you want to say, in the budget to engineering and community development. Is that essentially what happened, Paul?
Correct.
And I can't stress this enough, that's a team player, because it's, you could look at this process as, this is my department, I'm just going to fight for what's my department, and I'm not going to work with other departments and stuff. Dolly, you lead by example, and I appreciate that. Second thing, and if you don't know the answer to this, but it's a dog licenses fees. I mean, I know what the revenue is here. Isn't it like $7 to $10 a dog annually?
It's $10 if the dog is spayed or neutered. If it is not, then it's $20.
Okay, but we kind of think that we don't have every dog in this town licensed.
We do not.
And do you have an idea, well, based on that numbers, we kind of can guess how many dogs are licensed. 3,500 at $10, 1,700 dogs at 20, so it's probably somewhere in the middle. We have about 2,000 dogs licensed, something like that.
I'd have to.
Jenny, you went door to door a lot campaigning, right? Patty, you did too. You think we got more than 2,000 dogs in this town, Patty, and Jenny?
We have a lot of dogs. I mean, we have a lot of dogs, but they all look like they have tags.
Yeah. I don't know. John, I didn't say you because you have campaigned for a couple of years, but, you know.
We'll certainly get
There's a
back
lot
to
of
you with that
dogs.
number.
And it's interesting, it's something we'll talk about because it's not a minimal amount of money. If half the dogs aren't licensed, then we're basically talking about another $35,000 or $40,000.
Maybe time to do another dog census, which I understand there was one done in the past.
We'll talk.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Alex.
Next up, he's behind the beam. There he is. And he's a big man, so that beam is big. Steve Peace, who is our information technology manager.
As you see, the director salary, technician, and actually employee compensation help desk, which actually I don't think you'll hold you involved because I've been working with Brayton on that and finally came to list and extended an offer. Gentleman will be starting in the end of this month. So that number will need to be adjusted though because the pay scale is quite massively budgeted last year.
Just did the calculation before I had it over.
Yeah. So that number will need to be adjusted. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that is.
Yeah, it's gonna be around 41,000.
About a $6,000 increase over what we budgeted last year. Because for payroll, those are just last year's numbers. Capital purchases, we'll actually get to that one, save that one for last. As you can see, director's expenses, office supplies, smartphone, they're all pretty much the same. Computer system technical support, we did drop one contract that I just felt wasn't worth the money anymore. We have some spare equipment laying around, so if something happens, we do have a course back without that support contract. Director's expenses, $500 website design and maintenance. That is only there because I have one domain name that we have registered, so I pay for it here. Other than that, monthly insurance is taking over most of that, so I'm going for the cable access budget. And then our cell tower rent, it's gone up slightly. As time progresses with our agreements, we increase our rent. Been pretty flat over the years, but there's a slight increase in inflation, cost of service, all that other stuff. So the one budget line we have left is capital purchases, and you can see that shows a dramatic decrease. After meeting with members of Tom and management team here in the organization, as you probably heard from a couple people already, a lot of people on the budget line for computer purchases and technology purchases. We decided that it's a better reflection of how the departments are spending money in technology to give them the ability to budget for and plan themselves. The front end pieces for technology, so they say their computers, their monitors, their printers, office licensing, things of that nature. So in the interest of keeping my budget as flat as possible, I took last year's expenses, removed that from my budget, and then planned my budget accordingly. And that's why you see such a dramatic $60,000 increase in that budget line. So to try to keep my budget as flat as possible, it actually showed a decrease, but in actuality it's pretty flat from last year. Just since we moved all those purposes, the departments now are budgeting for themselves out of the budget. So that's why there's that one large decrease in my budget line. But beyond that, that's pretty much it. It's pretty flat. I do my best to keep it that way. Actually, it takes me 2.5 to function off of the previous $1,000 budget last year.
Any comments or questions?
Thank you very much, Steve.
No, thanks, Steve.
Good job.
Steve, we own a couple of cell towers, but we still do pay rent.
Yes.
How does that work?
It's a unique situation. We own the property the cell tower sits on, and the cell tower companies pay us rent to have cell towers there, but then they own the tower itself, and they rent out the space by foot on the tower itself. So they pay us rent, and then we pay them rent, and in actuality, we get a percentage of their rent that comes back. And
There is revenue.
so there's revenue that comes in from that. It's not reflected in my budget because it's part of the property to do that. Right. But so we do pay rent, but actually since we're a customer, I think a percentage of our rent comes back to us.
Yeah.
Lots of finance stuff I came down to checkbooks.
It's complicated. I analyzed it a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
It is complicated. Those companies are always changing hands too. The names,
Right.
every 2 years the names change. A little tough to follow.
To protect the innocent, they change.
That's right. Well, luckily the one is Crown Castle. They're pretty much big enough to grow on their own. They haven't changed much, but the highway tower, that's a smaller one. So they've changed hands a couple times. I know that vouchers say one thing, they'll say another.
Well, and the only other thing I'll say is that, and we've talked about this in some of the budget meetings, is that the one-year budget cycle doesn't reflect, one of the things we're trying to accomplish here is that when we move like munis and finance and rec track, which I'm sure, well, Chris, you went last week, that's fine. When you move those out to the cloud, it's going to have a positive effect on this budget in years to come because you won't have to buy servers and
Well, actually,
all that stuff.
it made it much easier to keep my budget flat.
Yeah.
Because we do need to do server upgrades, but by moving rec track off, we'll be able to put it off another year and move units off this year. So we're instead of having to buy 2 servers next year, and maybe we'll only have to buy 1. So it's already a big benefit to the IT department, help us keep that budget flat.
Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Well, we're ahead of schedule. Let's see, we probably are going to need it because up next is Art Patron out there. Is he behind the beam now? And here he comes. For one of the smaller budget departments, right? The sanitary sewer plant and collection system, which Art is now going to be called a water recovery. What's it called?
Water resource recovery facility.
I'm gonna get that down, Art.
The only way it's smaller is the smaller, fewer employees who are down there behind the scenes, working furiously so that everything goes correctly.
I hope everybody knew I was being sarcastic about being a small company and or a small department. larger ones in town, so. Have at it, Eric.
All right, going to hit the highlights today. I'm going to start right with summer help. Summer help is increased. Our foreman will be retiring. We're working to keep him 3 days a week, 26 weeks next year. It'll be a key benefit to have him during that construction, and also continue training our current staff. Compensation for employees. GA 120, 10142. This is an additional one waiver for the sewer department. This will keep us going. Really give us the ability to get our flush truck out and maintain the mains and laterals within the town. Whereas right now we're struggling with that. The amount of stakeouts we're doing, we're actually doing well on doing some maintenance items and so forth, but we need that extra weight to be able to keep that truck on the road. Monroe County sewer rents actually decreased. GA 1240335. That is part of the Sandbar project. As people keep tying in, we'll see, as we get to capacity, we'll see less people tying in. That's what that is reflecting. We're going to skip right down. Everything else is pretty flat. The heavy equipment repair. See that increased from 14,000 to 24,500. That is the trend we're seeing with our flush truck. It is aging. We have to put more money in it annually. We can talk about plan coming to replace that in the next year or two. We'll go to inside the plant, G8130. Compensation dipped slightly. That is due to Denise retiring and only working part-time. Capital purchases. Like that. And that is, that's going to be a snow pusher for the facility. Right now we struggle with moving all the snow we have in a timely manner. Also includes some overhead cranes. Cranes are throughout our plants, and our really all of our pump stations are obsolete. Actually, our pump station, it failed. They can't get that parts for them anymore. So we're going to start in a methodical fashion to replace these. We're hoping to use some local manufacturer for those. Skipping down. Our sludge hauling, always a big topic. Actually, before that, we'll see sodium hypochlorite, polymer, ferric chloride. These are chemicals used in the treatment process. All of those have jumped tremendously, and we're hoping to get a better handle on those. Hopefully, the supply chain sort of levels out. Sludge hauling is pretty well flat at this point. Going down to our lab supplies and fees. I see that increased, and that is due to the replacement of old and outdated equipment in our lab, scale, a drawing oven, and some supplies. These items have to be calibrated on a regular basis, and I think to the point that even our technicians are telling us that much longer. Building and ground maintenance. That is $10,000 worth of tree work and our rental trailer used to house part of our staff for breaks and lunch. And next page. Head down to a shoe allowance and rain gear. So this is a line item that is sort of titled inappropriately, but within there they will see a big increase of $9,000. What is in there is $9,000 of CDL training. The federal government has put a new mandate out regarding some training that is needed by every individual to obtain a CDL. It is probably about a 2-inch binder that is not very clearly written. We're working with Highway to decipher this, but in the event that we cannot decipher this, or can't handle this in-house, that those dollars are allocated to send our guys to training. We'll skip down all to lab analysis. 11,000 to 31,260. The biggest jump in there is we allocated 20 weeks of testing while the plant is under construction. Our lab will be under construction. It is a Warner County dedicated lab, so we put dollars in there to send our testing out for 20 weeks. $17,000 approximately would be town expense. $5,000 would be village. We do complete village testing. That $5,000 of the village cost will be reimbursed by the village. Utilities are what they are. They're increasing. Electric and gas have increased, or will be increasing.
Quite a bit this year, so what's left in the budget.
Do you want to touch on that benefits? Social Security, anything like that?
Yeah, we were doing an analysis of the employee benefits, the information projections for the New York State retirement system. And we were best to estimate the number. Social Security is just a function of the salaries that were budgeted, 7.65%. Workers' comp, that's permanent. We've had a little extra budgeted in that line, so I actually brought that down a little bit. Hospitalizations driven by the number of employees and the policies that they have. We're actually expecting a large increase year to year. I think it's going to be in the range of 15%. So that will build in. HRA and HSA admin, that's amounts that we pay to the employees. They're on high deductible, we had the HSA funding for the town. 80,000 for retirees benefits, hospitalization benefits. Those are for retirees who qualify for health insurance, not retirement. Just insurance and cash option payments for the employees that opt out of the health insurance. Just got the revenue from them. Which are driven largely by they're derived by the actual rate. The actual rate now is at 175.85. It's preliminary. But that's basically what drives most of these numbers. Or if you can talk about septic waste, when that's zero, this current year.
Yeah, absolutely. Septic waste is at zero. We do not have the ability to receive septic waste at this point because of the aeration. The treatment process just can't handle that intake of septic at this time. The aeration system is woefully inadequate. And of course, we need a permit. Try to get a permit. We have to turn it away.
Equipment. I think that has to do with vehicles that are going to be sold.
That is correct.
With enterprise fleet management.
That's correct.
Leasing vehicles. We're going to lease vehicles and we're going to sell some of the existing vehicles. And interest earnings is up substantially because interest rates are on the way up. So we're going to budget, pump that budget line into the side of things.
This has a few items in it. Is our budgeting system is aging, as everyone's in the country is aging. We're trying to get ahead of failures on 20 of the stations that we have. A few items in here, new pumps at one of the stations. We'll be installing panels at 2 of the station control panels. Be installing 2 new generators, standby generators at 2 of our stations. We do have funds in there to correct the inadequacies at our Glenita pump station that we just took over. We'll also be starting the process of replacing the rail systems in our submersible stations. The rails are what the pumps right on. The rails that are in our pump stations are, again, I can use the word, but they're obsolete. We're actually having parts made and change out for us at this point to keep them going. So it's the start of starting to replace those rails and mechanisms. So again, we'll just work through the station and we will come in for those. Don't need to do them all at once, but we need to start somewhere.
The next section is debt service, serial bond principal and interest payments on existing serial bonds that will mature between 2024 and 2049. There's currently no band principal or interest budgeted for these 2 wastewater treatment plant project. We anticipate borrowing for that in January of 2023, which means the first interest payment will be due until January of 2024, so that excludes it from this budget. We did, however, include a $550,000 transfer to the sewer capital reserve. The sewer does have a capital reserve set up with $4.7 million in it, and it's used for projects that seem to pop up. Some of them are unanticipated, and allows us to pay for those without borrowing. So we felt it was a good move to try to fund that capital reserves in 2023.
We've got the revenue on capital fund. You see increases from commercial sewer rents, Eric's rentals, and Penfield rentals. And this is driven mainly by the proposed increase of the rates.
Capital rate, as of right now, is 66.56. Again, that's preliminary, but that's what is where we need revenues up because we calculated with that rate. This one county debt reimbursement, that has to do with Sinmar sewer lines that were installed many years ago. It was a joint county-town project, and as part of that, the county reimburses us for those debt payments. Matures in 2024.
I think it is it not?
What's that?
Question time.
Question time.
All right.
Absolutely.
So in capital improvements for pump stations, I know earlier in your budget, you were talking about cranes. So I just had a question. Do you include any of the cost of the new cranes in your capital improvements for pump stations on page 20?
No, so I'm targeting 2 cranes at the treatment plant first. Again, if we're looking at where the most need is. Now, I can't, that being said, between now and January 1st, we might not shift one of those needs to one of the pump stations. But as of right now, I'm targeting at least 2.
Gotcha. How old is our flush car?
Flusher's, I think, 11 years old.
So that makes sense.
No, I think it depends how much money you want to put into it, like anything else. we're getting into some bigger, last year I think we had $115,000 repairs on items that they're having trouble finding, which is tough to believe. Honestly, it is. So I wanted to put some extra money in there for those repairs, and again, just sort of planning ahead that we might be looking at in the next few years.
I know these flush trucks are extremely expensive, but
Yes, they are.
many people may not know that. What is the average cost of a flush truck?
So from the little bit of research I did, I think when we go to buy one, it'll be $500,000. So in like used cars, there's a market for those as well. So we should get some good value out of it.
So your foreman, when's your foreman retire?
At the end of the year.
Do we have anyone in mind to replace him, or could we hire an outsider or away from the van?
I'm working with Braden on that. Two different options there. And see how the structure falls out. Looking within if we can. If not, we'll look outside. We want to get the right fit.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
I say things are.
Sure. So in sewer operation and maintenance, the shoe allowance and rain gear went from 5,000 to 14,000. Never seen your explanation. I just need a little clarity on that. So the federal government has mandated new CDL training, correct?
They have.
Is that for all CDLs that our employees currently have, or are we going to send employees that don't have CDLs currently to get their CDL?
It is for employees or any CDL driver that wants to obtain that license. So current CDL holders do not need to go through this training. It's anyone wishing to obtain a CDL.
So how many employees do you have that do in your department that need CDLs and don't have?
Right now, I can identify two,
Okay.
and I can see if they're going to.
Okay. That's all. Definitely my last question.
Okay.
Keep going.
We have a limited small pool, obviously, of staff. Everyone there really needs to have a CDL for us to function properly. And this is, honestly, Jen, I'm hoping Denise is working with Highway to try to sort through this, and hopefully we can just get it done in-house.
So say, for example, you're going to hire a new employee. Is it your policy that they have to come with the CDL?
It is not. If we can complete that training in-house and we can sort through it, we won't need to spend those costs, which would be great. And it's not kind of
Thank you very much.
Honestly, and Eddie, I want to short you if you have questions.
I do not have questions on this budget.
And there it is. For anybody watching this or attending live or watching the TV, each of the board members is liaison to one or two or three of the town departments. Patty is the department liaison to sewer. So within this budget process, a lot of these meetings, it's Patty, myself, Paul, and Art. That's why when Art presents, Patty and I aren't going to have many questions. We've been at the table. But I do applaud you, John, because you are not the liaison to sewer. You had some great questions.
To your point, Councilman Cato, is Highway Superintendent Stevens just walked in. He's been knee-deep in the CDL training. He can probably enlighten you more on that when he comes up later.
Yeah. All right.
Take some notes there, Pat. I'll be really into questions right away.
That's good.
Well, that'd be great to get more information.
All right, what's great is we're still ahead of schedule when we get you out of the hot seat. But for all those, next Thursday is the workshop. We have our friends from Navitas in. Yeah. Sewer's the thing in this town right now, right?
It's a thing.
Well, great.
for 4 hours, couldn't you, Harv, if you were? Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, geez, Adam, is that a tough act to follow?
Certainly is.
Adam Traub, our new, well, he's still how old? 7.5 months in, library director?
You were showing yourself maybe for the first 2 years.
Yes, I mean, you know, but he seems to have a handle on his job a lot more than I have on my job. Have at it, Adam.
Alrighty, so the first 3 lines that we have here are personnel salaries. As a note, I put in a guesstimate as what 2023 might be for department heads, but that is related to you all, so I put a guesstimate in for my board when the time comes. You see the average or year-over-year 2% increase for most of these lines, with the exception of hourly personnel. We had a key retirement this year, and we bring in a new person to fill that position, not at the rate of the experienced person who's in that position. Going down, there's a line here, 20,000 equipment purchases, which we did not use or haven't used in the past. That is to replace our security keypad to our staff entrance after a security audit that Chief Coleman did with us in following tragic events in Buffalo. Going down, most of this is the same. You'll notice a small increase in the copier lease line. That's 48,100. We're replacing our copier with one that can both do black and white and color, and one where we will own the cash machine. Many vendors are no longer making these machines that take coins or dollar bills, and so the increase there will be offset by the revenue. Going down, another big change that you all may see is in 40,329 and 40,330. After the board workshop where I presented some of the challenges that the library is facing, and in consultation with Paul, we separated out the rent and the common area charges and taxes to kind of highlight those particular challenges. So the figure there represents the increase that we expect, but we wanted to separate them out so that we all have a better way of tracking them year over year, especially those common area charges and taxes.
Yeah, it appears as though the common area charges, CAM charges are underestimated in the 2022 budget. During the pandemic, shutdown, those costs dropped.
Yeah,
I think they got a credit in 2021, which kind of threw us off in the 22 budget.
I think that's fair. Yeah, there was deferred maintenance. We received a credit in 2021 after some of that deferred maintenance. And there seemed to be some cyclical, as I looked over the CAM charges over the past 10 or so years, there are some cyclical maintenance charges, but then the deferred maintenance during the pandemic, I think, threw the estimate off. I think have a pretty good handle on what we expect. It ended up being about a 3.7% increase between 2019 and 2021, if you take out 2020 as an outlier. Moving down, our cost share to the Monroe County Library System remains flat for the second year in a row. The following line, 40,530, library materials, or the stuff that goes in the library. This is trying to address that gap that I identified in the workshop in May. It will not fully address that gap, but I see this as a slow march towards addressing that gap. The next line down, library databases, there's a small increase here to address subscription fees that are rising. The rest flat. Going down to natural gas, this increase was in consultation with Paul to try and address the rising increase in natural gas charges. Electric, it It is my optimistic hope that this number drops after the LED lighting, but we can't bet on that because of rising energy charges. So we see a small increase there. So the total, moving down to benefits, this was all anything that we should address specifically here.
Yeah, once again, I calculated the retirement based on projections provided by New York State. Social Security is 7.65% of the budgeted wages. Hospitalization is given to employees and what policies they have. And any retirees that have hospital insurance as well. We do a comparison of prior year actuals, budgets to kind of estimate where it should be at.
Moving down to revenues, you'll notice a decrease in book fines. This both reflects the nationwide trend of decreasing book fine revenue, as well as the board's decision to drop fines for juvenile and adult material. The next line, you'll see an increase. This is an increase both reflecting our increased foot traffic year over year since the pandemic, as well as my hope that people will take fuller advantage of this easier to use and higher quality copy machine that we're replacing. Moving down, there's a large increase on our interest. And then the state aid here, I will make a note. This will be updated before October, but I'm not going to count my chickens before they're hatched. We did receive a small increase in state aid this year, and I did receive that final notice this week, so that will be adjusted up with a slight increase in the program. And moving down, the other large change that you may note is a $0 appropriation of the fund balance in an attempt to grow that with the view that in 9 years we will likely have to use heavily of that fund balance for whatever solution we need to for housing and library once that makes sense.
The library is funded by a general fund. It's not funded by raising property taxes, so the amount currently budgeted for e-transfer is to $2,348,196, which is up about 5% year to year.
Although I'll note that the total appropriations year over year is about 2.6%.
Thank you, Adam. It's really helpful. And I know that the library is, more than one community. And there are things in there that we have to write. We just sort of really have to do a lot. So I really appreciate that. I have a small minor question. Really have to budget convention. Are we writing? Is that something that we recently switched over to?
We've slowly switched over to, so the construction funds that we used to replace the HVAC came in under budget. And so to maximize our match from New York State, we replaced a bunch of older non-units with that. So we're kind of trying to do it zone by zone throughout the life. Not fully LED this one.
I mentioned that because that was one of the list of 150 requirements of our communities. When we were debating that, we talked about things that we're already doing. So in this instance, how are we doing that? Check off that box that we chose to go on.
And Paul, I know it was you said 2,000 something, I think you meant 2,348,196 is what, if this stays true, would be transferred from the general fund over to the library, correct?
Correct.
And unlike all the other departments we do, all these line items that Adam just went over, because they're the libraries under state education law, we, at the town government, finance, we don't have to keep say track of each of those line items in the state, but that's an appropriation line item, what is it called? You can't go over it, once you say. And the library board would want flexibility per se with the, if the town transfers over $2,348,000. Okay. If Adam and the library board, and I think Adam, you started a pretty good relationship with Paul and asking for financial, advice on certain things. If Adam and the library board manage their business well, they get more revenues than they anticipate. They get less cost and manage those less. If their year end is better than the budget, than the $2,348,000 in this case, let's say they do better by $100,000. Does that $100,000 go back to the town's general fund, or does it go to the library fund balance?
It's in the library fund.
Okay. And Adam said at the end that he is looking to manage that library fund balance over the years because in 9 years you're anticipating releases over in the library that some of that or whatever the library fund balance may be needed for a new different facility, which is logical. Paul, what is the fund balance of the library history in the last 3 or 4 years?
I think it finished 2021 with about 430-some thousand, and actually has grown significantly over the past 2 or 3 years. Actually during the pandemic, we saved quite a bit on compensation, compensation versus the budget. So 3 years ago, I think the fund balance was around 170.
I think, John, when you took over as liaison, it was in the 100 some odd range or early on in 20. So it's really both through good management and just kind of serendipitous luck, I'll call it, I hate to say it, a few good things about COVID. The fund balance for the library is in the 400,000. And I took you down this primrose path of questioning because Adam and I have started discussions, and actually I've now met with the president, chair of the foundation, the library foundation board, and I'm seeking in the next couple weeks to meet with the president or chair of the Friends of Webster Library. Simply said, when Adam presented to the board in May, and he affectionately called it the stuff, the materials that they go out and buy for the library, books, audiobooks, digital books, all that stuff. Adam showed that historically, the Webster Library, for a socioeconomic community that we are in the population, is investing about half what other like-sized libraries do on materials. So, I want to partner up with the library leadership and board, and also that foundation and the Friends, or whatever they're called. There's more cooks in the kitchen than I know what to do with. To see if there's something that can be done collaboratively to address that faster. I know you said here you were increasing your line item here from 102,000 to 110,000. But you can even just, within managing your budget well this year in 23, increase that line item 23 to 150,000 if you somehow cut another 50,000 throughout the year of 23. Did I confuse the issue?
No, potentially, that's an option.
Okay. So, that's what we've been talking about. And I have one more meeting to have. I don't even know who the leadership is of the Friends. You don't have to say that. But once that meeting is had, if it follows the other ones that I've had, that they're like, yeah, I'd be interested in having that conversation. Then I think we can get 4 entities. I think it's 4. Library board, library director, foundation of the library, friends of the library, and the town. Actually, that's 5. Which the town would be represented, Jenny, by you and I. And potentially Paul, too, because it's a financial. And see if we can come up with something. stick around. Thanks, Ed.
Any other questions?
And was this your first budget presentation
To this board.
to this board?
Yes.
Good job.
There we go. So, oh, okay. Now, we have it as community development first and engineering second. Is that where you're gonna go, or? Mary, you wanna go first?
Our budgets are so intertwined that there's different funds that either of us are going to speak to.
Okay. Cool.
We'll take turns.
Sounds good.
So I'll go through the first one, building maintenance. The first line item, it shows that there was no expense allocated in this year for it. I'm proposing $10,000 for next year. Last year in 2021, we spent about $8,500 coordinating with highway on the front sidewalk modification. There used to be a big puddle out in front of town hall whenever it rained. Repaving the front parking lot and striping it. They put in a sidewalk for us and some other miscellaneous site improvements, and I'd like to continue doing that year to year, just picking away at some improvements around town hall. Excuse me, town hall and the courthouse. Capital improvements and maintenance have remained the same. Capital improvements is for unforeseen single purchases. An example is replacing the door down by the exterior door down by the police officer's entrance this year, and pumps and things that fail. The maintenance line is more for routine things like pest control, HVAC, the maintenance contract. The town building cleaning service, we are proposing to budget a little bit higher for next year in anticipation of potentially needing to rebid it depending on how the contract goes this year. Refuse and telephone has remained the same. We're proposing to increase natural gas and electric just based on this year's expenses. We've just about hit or exceeded what was budgeted for natural gas already, and we're about halfway through. And then slight increase in water. So that is building maintenance. Are there any questions on that area of the budget?
Yeah. Can I ask one?
Sure.
I think we're going to have to take a look at the HVAC situation down the hall. John, I heard you chuckle. Because I think we have about a dozen residential units.
Yes, it's definitely not a cohesive system that's in place at Town Hall right now. There's a lot of small units that aren't meant to operate in such a size building. So it would be a great project to overhaul the HVAC and get something that's properly sized for the building.
John is chuckling there.
Yeah, that's something that wasn't touched in the renovation, to my understanding, was the HVAC system.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the fire marshal's office, the first line item is for overtime. Those are generally call-outs for evening and weekend emergencies in which the fire marshal's office must respond. So we're keeping that flat year over year. The next line item is the fire marshal's salary, which is dictated by the union contracts. Below that is the part-time assistant fire marshal. We are proposing a slight increase for that position to account for inflation and cost of living. That is a part-time role, so they are not covered under the collective bargaining agreement. Computer equipment and licensing, it was at 0 for the current year. We've since implemented tablets for inspection out in the field. So there are some software costs associated with that application. Likewise, cellular telephones has increased. In order for the field tablets to work, we needed to purchase data plans through our cell phone service provider. But I believe it's leading to a lot of efficiencies overall. And training and seminar, that's to cover their annual fire safety conference that they attend each year, which is required continuing education credits. We've kept their supply line flat year over year. The auto maintenance budget has been increased due to the 2 fire marshal vehicles. They will not be ones that are replaced through our fleet program this year, so we just wanted to be prepared in case there are any issues with those 2 vehicles. And fuel we've increased due to current economic conditions. Are there any questions on that section of the budget?
I do, but I don't want to talk about that. Is the revenue that we are now doing in 22 reflected for fire marshals someplace else in this budget?
I believe it is reflected later on in the budget, not within this particular section.
Gotcha. All right. And I call that affectionately the John Cahill revenue. Because Councilman Cahill, you were very instrumental in researching that with other towns and bringing that to us. It was smart. And I just want to make sure, and Paul, you might be the best to answer this, is the fire marshal in the white collar union or blue collar?
White collar.
Okay. I know it doesn't seem like much, but correct me if I'm wrong, Paul. We right now have flat white collar, blue collar cost of living adjustments because we have negotiated the white and blue collar contracts for January 1st, 23.
That's right. 0% CPI right now.
Okay. So we will change that on the fire marshal line to flat to be consistent with every other white collar. I don't know if I can say.
You got a step increase.
You got a step increase?
Yeah.
Okay, then that's what that is.
Yeah.
Okay,
Increase
sorry.
0%
Strike that. And then the part-time fire marshal, how, non-union, part-time, how are the part-time, heavily in the other budgets, I think there has been a somewhat COLA increase to that in this budget, is that correct?
Some have, some haven't. I would say it's inconsistent.
It's basically based on the
Usually it goes
department.
along with the blue collar, white collar contract.
Okay.
I would say for the most part, there are not only part-time pay increases built in here, but there was on that particular line.
Okay. And the other reason I bring it up is, I mean, this is kind of a microcosm. You'll notice that throughout this, all the department heads have no increase from 22 to 23. In this budget at this point, that was purposeful. We talked to all the department heads. None of the town board members, none of the blue collar, white collar, because we don't have the contract. Really, the only slotted increase, COLA, is the police contract that we discussed last week. That they'll be going into their third and last year. It's collective bargaining agreed, but it's 2.5%.
Yeah.
Right. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing something outside of the overall philosophy of this budget for fire marshal and part-time fire marshal. And it doesn't sound like we are.
Part-time we did.
We'll move on.
Okay, so the Public Works Fund is what the next one's called. The first line, part-time employees, that number is associated with our part-time GIS staff member currently, and allocating some funds towards the intern program that we have done the last 2 summers, and they'll be presenting at next week's workshop on what they've done this summer for us. I think we'll be very impressed with what they've accomplished. There is a small line item for overtime that has remained the same since last year. Director of Community Development and Town Engineer. And then the full-time employees is inclusive of the Assistant Town Engineer. That was a position approved in the budget last year, and we filled it recently, and he just started on Monday. And then another employee who was formerly in charge of GIS and some other tasks for engineering has moved to the building department, so that's an open position that will be refilled in the upcoming months. And then we also had a retirement in my department, which is a construction inspector type position that will be filled in the upcoming months. And then there's also a clerk who is shared between community development and engineering. So that's the 4 positions that are in that line item. The next one is the new IT budget line item. So this includes licensing for the department as well as some computer replacements. The capital purchase has money set aside for some additional tablets, because those have been a big asset to the employees that we've outfitted to date, and we'd like to get more. Some office furniture, and starting to replace some filing cabinets around the office. The next few are pretty generic. Safety equipment, office supplies. The cleaning is the other half of the A fund that we just talked about. Cell phones for some of our staff. Some more just general office things. The VAS annual support system that we use, municipal fees and publications. The equipment lease is for the copier that's in our area of the office. The next line item is new. The vehicle operating lease expense is the enterprise line item. So the one here accounts for the Ford Ranger that we're getting, as well as 3 Escapes, and we're getting a 5th vehicle, but that's accounted for under the building department. Vehicle expense has gone way down since we only have 1 or 2 that won't be new. We put some money aside for conference expenses for continuing education for Josh and myself and other staff. We've kind of earmarked stormwater floodplain conference that we'd like to attend next year. Internet is for the town hall campus. Fuel has gone up some. And then the engineering and surveying services are for any consultant services that we may need throughout the year. Uniforms to provide our staff with some polos and town gear to look professional. Our GIS professional services is a consultant. We currently use MRB to help us troubleshoot some of our more technical GIS questions. And then again, the utilities for the town hall campus of gas and electric. And then the one revenue line item in this area is the anticipated fees collected from inspection and engineering for the development that occurs in town. Are there any questions on this fund?
How many vehicles scheduled to arrive?
We asked that question. So all 5 have been scheduled for production. So I think we're another 2 or so months out, but they at least all made it on the schedule to actually be made, and then it takes the time for them to be produced and shipped and get outfitted. So I'm hoping by October we start seeing some show up at town hall.
It's been a long wait.
Sure has.
Okay, moving on to the building department. First line item, we kept relatively flat, 1,000 for overtime. The second one is for the building inspector salary. Third one is the clerk that supports the building inspector and assistant building inspector. The assistant building inspector, you'll note that there's a pretty sizable increase from last year. That is due to the previous employee leaving that position after 6 months or so. And then we ended up promoting from within. So due to union contracts, that essentially dictated where this employee sits on the pay scale. The next line item is representing what I'd like to do with our existing code enforcement officer title, which is currently vacant. I'm proposing to change that role slightly to a code compliance coordinator with the thought of getting some additional assistance for helping with identifying problematic sections of our code and taking a more proactive approach to code enforcement in terms of identifying certain common complaints that we often receive in the office that our current code just simply doesn't have regulations that deal with certain things. So we're tweaking that title to add a little bit more responsibility. Our department had originally requested an additional full-time junior planner to help with the day-to-day operations in the office. So that was not really palatable at this point, so the alternative was to slightly expand the role of the code enforcement officer with additional focus on helping to move forward some much needed code changes and revisions. So we do have a particular candidate in mind. We will be entering into negotiations with them. The next line has to do with the computer equipment licensing. We'll be replacing 1 or 2 of the desktop computers in the building department, one of which is a permit counter. It is one of our older computers and doesn't always perform as it should when we're working with customers at the counter. So we will be replacing that. Professional services and town code compliance. Those are services that we occasionally need to procure to either secure sites after an incident or professional serving of code enforcement notices. So we do typically have some money set aside for that, as well as problem properties that aren't mowing their lawn or there isn't currently a homeowner. Occasionally we have to hire a service to cut lawns. supplies, we've increased by 300 to be more commensurate with how we're tracking with this current budget year. The vehicle operating lease expense represents one of the new lease vehicles that we will be receiving. The dues and conferences are the annual training, Finger Lakes Building Association training that the building staff goes to. It is an annual expense. It was omitted from last year's budget, which is why it's showing as an increase, but in reality, it is an annual expense. The fuel expense, we kept relatively flat. We will be getting a newer vehicle, and I guess the thought was we most likely be able to be more fuel efficient than the current one. And since we are getting that new vehicle, we've reduced vehicle maintenance line down to 0. And we've also added a slight amount for uniforms, jackets, polos, etc. for our staff. So as you can see, we kept revenue from building permits relatively flat. I think that number, I think we're on track to exceed that number for the current fiscal year. But with the uncertainty in the economy and the supply chain issues, material costs going up, we opted to keep the revenue flat in case there's a reduction in building activity next year. Would there be any questions on this part of the budget?
Yes. So your code enforcement compliance coordinator, I think that's a great addition. I know we've had discussions as to what his role would be. And you had mentioned that there's a lot of common code complaints that you receive. Can you just give us a couple of examples of some of the common code complaints that you receive?
One that we hear quite a lot of is parking on lawns, parking of vehicles on front lawns. Currently, our code does not have anything that prohibits that. Some other municipalities in Monroe County have very specific rules and regulations specific to where you can park vehicles. That's definitely a common one. The high grass and the weeds, we already have something on the books for that, but that's obviously another common one. There's some ambiguity in terms of outdoor storage of materials.
Right.
There's some vague gray areas that we like to shore up so that we...
And that'd be great because there are some yards that you think
so we're looking to bolster our regulations to give us more teeth to be able to address these common issues that we hear very often.
Yeah, that's good. I think it's going to be very well found when it starts looking into these things and then actually bring it to the board so we shore up these codes because just the examples that we gave are much needed, in my opinion. It makes his job easier too, to take the ambiguity away from the codes that he's trying to enforce. Keep it as better as everybody, including the homeowner, right?
Right. Yeah, whenever we can remove ambiguity out of the code, I think that's generally a positive thing.
Yeah, I think you're moving in the right direction. The other question I had was, where do you show your revenue from code violations?
I don't believe it's a separate line item. Believe it or not, we don't find very often. I don't think we have a very significant revenue stream from code enforcement at this point.
Do we send our employees out for grass that is overgrown and then charge for cutting those lawns?
Yes, we prepare a third-party service, we pay that service to perform the lawn cutting, and then ultimately that fee gets added to the property tax bill.
So that would be, okay, so you would just, I got you.
So we ultimately recoup it. It is a upfront expense to the town, but the thought is we recoup it through the tax.
Josh, the only question I had was the way you described the code enforcement compliance coordinator. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you said we're about to enter into, an offer negotiation. Does that mean we got good news from civil service today?
We did get very good news this afternoon.
Great.
We have approved the tweaking of that title.
That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's in my mind.
Good job.
Yeah, so I will be sharing that news with the prospective candidate tomorrow, and then once Greg gets back, we will
That's great.
negotiations.
That's great.
Are there any other questions on that portion? Moving along to the zoning board of appeals. The first line item under this section is compensation for the board members, which I believe they received a slight increase earlier this year or late last year. We opted to keep it flat for this year. The second line item is the recording secretary, who is essentially split between both the planning board and the zoning board. So that line item represents 50% of the salary of that position. We have an attorney to the board. That salary is reflected in the next line item. Occasionally, there's some additional support needed by the town attorney. So we've included some funds to account for that on some of the more complicated legal zoning matters. The office and mileage is to reimburse the board members for performing their site visits. So they submit receipts with their mileage, and then the town reimburses them for that expense. The signage is to cover the cost of our property under review signs for any applications that are going before the zoning board. And then legal expenses in case there are any special circumstances that require additional legal expenses. So as you can see, the revenue from the zoning fees is slightly reduced from the current year. That's in anticipation of less variance requests due to updated fence and shed regulations that were recently passed. I thought there would be a substantial reduction in variance requests, and there are for sheds and fences, but there have been an interesting number of variance requests that have continued on. So we've slightly adjusted the revenue from that aspect. And I'll just continue on. Much like the zoning board, the planning board, there's compensation for the 7 members of that board. The recording secretary, again, that's the other 50% of the salary of that employee. There's another attorney to the planning board. So that's their salary line item. And then again, mileage reimbursements site visits. We have seen a slight reduction in the amount of planning board applications, so we've reflected a slight reduction in our revenue from those fees.
Employee benefits are just based on history, what that's been previously, for the most part. Medical insurance spending up 15% increase expected for 2023.
And all of that,
It actually decreased this line item because they had too much in it the previous year.
those employee benefits, there's 10 line items that add up to 315,000. That's for the whole engineering, community development, planning board.
Right. In the revenue category, the largest revenue is $384,000 for sales tax. We actually changed the allocation. It gets split between the general part-time fund and the highway part-time fund. We shifted so that most of the sales tax is now being credited to the highway part-time fund. And that's in an effort to bring down the fund balance within the general part-time fund, or B fund. The town has a fund balance policy. B fund is significantly over that, as was the highway fund, but trying to get the B fund balance down to within the acceptable range as outlined by the fund balance policy. So if you can see down below, we've actually appropriated $400,000 of the fund balance for the 2023 budget. So that's our effort to reduce the fund balance, improve the fund balance within this fund. Which is the reason we decreased the sales tax allocation. Sales tax has been historically high for 2021, 2022 is trending the same way. We wouldn't expect that to continue. But that's right now. Inflation, obviously, will drive it up because prices go up, so does the sales tax.
Since we can never actually put a finger on what that's going to be, that means a nice surprise.
Right.
Are we still part of that health consortium?
We sure are. And that's why when we do 15%, it's disappointing to hear. We don't limit, whatever that acronym stands for. They haven't come out yet and said exactly what the increase is. They just said comparative.
Yes, they've seen as high as 19%, and some other communities have negotiated contracts. The health insurance provided by the consortium is being bid. They won't have the results until September or so. But they have seen as high as 19%. Basically, there's just two players that have qualified to bid, Excellus and MVP. We're with MVP right now. See what happens.
They should have
I only have one question of presentation was done. And I hate to be a poor step, but so where was the revenue from fire marshal?
I don't think the revenue from fire marshal was built into this budget. I just made a note to check on that. It's something we can probably add in.
Okay.
It would end up actually in general.
Yeah, I'd like to know year-to-date, since 2022 was the first year it went into effect, I think, okay?
Yes.
How that,
I have to check on it. Do you feel for much time, or is there actual anything significant coming in?
Well, I know that we implemented it originally in March. I don't have the exact amounts of revenue collected to date, but I can speak to it.
Yeah, how do you track that?
Well,
Just out of curiosity.
the fire marshal's office works with our clerk, and our clerk facilitates the finance. Most of our invoicing, it is fully managed by our finance department.
So it is tracked.
Absolutely.
I'd be very interested in knowing that, what that number is.
Okay.
We'll check it out.
Something like a month.
John, I applaud you for having done all the research with all the other towns and bringing the concept to the table. So you got it done, and I'm interested in how it's going.
I absolutely.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Josh, you're right.
Yes, sir. Jack? How much for this one?
I would be pleasantly surprised.
It will. Honestly.
You'll get a real bad picture.
Okay, well, that's all I live for, is, you know, you're an attaboy. I'm sure you won't like it. Well, luckily, we're still 8 minutes ahead of schedule because Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent, is about to present what I think all is the business within the town government business, if you want to call it highway, the largest subset of.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So Pat is running the largest organization, both dollars and potentially staff too, right? Well, Chris, if you've been part-time, you probably are more. It counts. Of course it counts. Pat, have at it.
Perfect, thank you. So I'll just run down through this. As Tom said, there's a lot of lines here. I'm going to try to focus on the ones that have changes so we can understand the difference between last year and this year primarily. As I'm going, if there's any specific questions or things I missed, please or chime in and ask me to explain more. I'm more than happy to touch on any of them. So as we start down through here at the top of the town line fund, I see salaries for myself, and then there's compensation for employees, which includes the admin staff at the office. The increase you see there is grade changes, so they're merit-based increases based on the current contract. As we touched on a little bit earlier, we're in a contract year, so those COLA increases are flat currently, so you'll see various different lines in here. Labor lines or employee compensation lines that are slightly increased. We did factor in what we felt for merit increases for that in 2023 for the current contract. That's what's carried in.
Step increases only.
Correct. Okay. Head a little bit farther down, you see the $5,000 increase for computer equipment and licensing. That's due to the restructuring of how IT is operating, putting the budgetary values for each department within their budget instead of separately in an IT budget. So last year we put in $5,000 for that, for computers and software, things of that nature. A little bit farther down, I should see a decrease in the security system monitoring, 21,000 down to 7,500. That was because there was a large upgrade needed this year that we didn't have any choice in at the highway facility for the security. There had to be a 5G receiver put in, so this current budget has $13,000. That is that specific upgrade. That's not an upgrade that's needed every year, so we're back down to a normal operating budget for our security system of $7,500 in 2023. Down through the rest of it, things are generally flat, pretty the same from year to year. Get down into utilities, there's some increases in there, and those are just based on the rates we've seen the last year, basically. Some of those numbers have gone up pretty significantly. That's a little bit twofold. The rates literally have gone up for these utility companies. And then secondly, we're not currently operating the most efficient building down there. So when rate increases go up, they affect us more greatly because the building is 50 years old and isn't efficient. So it actually compounds that number to the lack of efficiency in addition to the rate increases going up. So if you were to take a efficient newer building, those increases would be less than the rate because quality consumption is important. So that's why those have jumped up pretty significantly.
Yeah, the inside and the outside.
Yeah, especially when we go out to plow, literally all the leaves and
Yep.
it has to get refilled. So hopefully we'll fix that in the near future. but we'll see. So those are the main sections of that fund. Over to townwide.
Any comments on street lighting, intersection lighting?
Oh, sorry, I missed that. I don't think there was many changes in there.
No.
So the street lighting was very similar, some small increases. We saw increased cost in some of our lighting districts. There are very few in town. We do hire that out, which is mostly electrical. But we did see some increases. Wanted to carry a little on in there. I also, these are interesting small little districts. Most of the lights in town are managed by RG&E. I would also like to at some point look into the districts that we do have and see what it would take to upgrade them with efficiencies, LED programs, different stuff like that. That might be good grant funding, different things for. And then potentially, depending on how it goes, see if RG&E would be willing to take them over to a certain extent. A lot of them are so small that we do so little of it that we're not able to really efficiently manage lighting districts. We don't have our own staff that handles anything with the lights. So if we could upgrade those systems to be current and efficient and possibly get them to be taken over by a utility, like 90% of them are in town, that would be kind of my ultimate goal for the lighting at this time. So. Sure, sorry. Yeah, highway townwide. You'll see there in the top, there's another employee compensation section that primarily the increase there is to represent the merit and step increases within the current contract. Again, there is some sections down through here where there are going to be additional expenses for additional employees. And we have several different labor lines within these different funds that work in certain ways. So when I add an employee, it's not seen in one chunk, in one place. So it affects several different lines. We have labor lines for leaves, for snow removal, for regular road work, for maintenance, all that type of stuff. So just to hit that quickly, we currently have a budget for 40 employees at the highway department. The plan for next year is to go to 42 employees, making our way towards the direction where our federal team would be based on the mileage of roads that we currently have and the number of people in town that we service. Right now we're on the longer side. This really comes into play with our winter operations, with our snow and ice removal. We've seen the amount of time it takes to plow the entire town increase slightly over the years. So the biggest factor in that is as miles of road get added, if we don't add employees and trucks to get with them, each truck has to go farther, which takes longer. So we start to see these times creep up. And it's one of the major things in a huge storm. Right now we're between 4 and 6 hours. In a large storm it takes about 6 hours to clear the entire town, that includes county, state, and local roads. In a big storm, it's snowing an inch an hour. If it takes 6 hours from when I started this house to when I finish the route and come back around, that first house has 6 inches of snow. The last house on the route doesn't. And we can get as much as 2 inches an hour. So that first house could have a foot of snow. And the other house in the other section of town just got plowed. That causes people to feel like we had an even better. So we really need to get that brought back down closer to the 4-hour range maximum. And that's going to obviously just move those numbers and get things back to a better service level than we currently get to right now. Now, the guys do a great job. They often do it a lot faster than that. We do a lot of preventative work to make sure there aren't issues, but they can only go so fast. So that's the reason for the increase in employees this year from 40 to 42. It's nothing to do with that specific line, but like I said, it's kind of hard to see all the places that they go up. So as we go down through a little bit farther, we get to the equipment purchases line. That's always kind of one of our biggest lines. The equipment we use for all of our activities, whether it's summer maintenance or winter snow removal, is very, very expensive. And I'm continuing to make the push toward having newer equipment that is turned over more quickly with less hours on it in order to capitalize on the resale and overall drive the equipment cost down over time. So we're starting to see a little bit of this trend that we'll touch on later in the revenue section. of this, but we are starting to see the revenue we're generating from the resale equipment that we're using starting to creep up and go up. As that happens, the delta between the purchase of new equipment and what we're reselling it for will get smaller, and that's going to drive the overall cost for the taxpayers down. It also increases our ability to serve, so with less breakdowns and less older equipment, we don't have to worry about loss in service due to equipment. So this, I'll just tap out there a little bit farther down. We've increased the annual maintenance by $30,000. Labor and maintenance we have to send out is through the roof. Parts are more and more expensive with the Tier 4 efficient diesel systems that are out there. So our equipment is still old enough and needing enough repairs that equipment part is going up. If we can get everything to be newer, say less than 4,000 hours or close to it, at least on our heavy use items, you're going to see that number drop significantly, over $100,000 at a time, because newer equipment doesn't have as many hours, doesn't take as much maintenance, doesn't have as many breakdowns, and if they are, they go into warranty. A lot of the equipment we're purchasing now, we are purchasing between 3 and 5 years of warranty on it, so if we can stay within that frame, it really freezes and stabilizes what we're going to have in those maintenance costs.
That's a good enough. Could save labor too, if we're doing a lot of repairs.
Yeah, I mean,
At that time, is something we'll put up.
yeah, when we get into heavy time like this year, I think there's been a street sweeper in our shop almost every day. In the last few weeks, we got done with chip seal, so they're out, all 3 of them are out full time. They have breakdowns, they have issues. One was 20 years old. So we're working on that actually very soon on a new sweeper. So, but that's just a general equipment section. So this year we are slightly higher. We were able to do that because of some additional revenue lines and different things that will come up a little bit later. We'll expand a little bit more, which balanced out the fund overall for our lines. But going down through the rest of that section, major changes, you'll see the vehicle operating lease expense line. That is the enterprise leasing program. We currently have performance trucks in that section. So next year we anticipate, in order to switch out those trucks on a 5-year rotation, the lease expenses will be about $50,000. We're hoping to order those trucks this fall. We have not been able to order the Super Duty, the heavy duty trucks, so we can put the plows on them yet this year. They're saying there might be a window in October, maybe November. The Chevy window that opened for orders this year was 1 day. And they filled the orders and stopped. So I'm not sure what the Fords we're looking at match our current fleet will end up like. If we get them ordered in October, November, we may see them by next October. So that's currently the feedback from enterprise. Pickup trucks, a lot of the equipment purchases that are in that $980,000 are in the same bracket. I got a quote for a lowboy trailer earlier this year. It was a 45-month lead time. Yeah. It's just, I don't know. So some of this stuff's getting out of control. Our large trucks, the big 10-wheel dump trucks, they're a little over a year, I'd say 18 months. We're trying to get into a program now where we're bringing in agreements or intents to purchase that have some language in them about being contingent on a budget being passed, so that we can get something on their books, almost in case of line, so to speak, so that when the budget for the next year does pass, we're already in line. We don't have to start back behind 20 other people that have purchased. So there's a few of those things I'm trying to be creative with, and you may see in here to discuss coming up. That's the equipment section is challenging, both in dollars and now just taking the equipment. Even once you get the funds and we establish the budget, it takes a very long time to actually get the equipment in the door. And during that time, I've seen at least a couple pieces already. We have accrued quite a lot of cost on some of the older pieces that we're keeping during that time. So really hoping to find a way to shorten that window. As we move down through, we touched on equipment repair and maintenance. That's up slightly. You'll see the labor, and just still having some equipment that continues to need quite a lot of annual expense. We weren't able to knock that down yet. We're not quite at that point with changing out our equipment. So moving down from there, we go into the revenue section. I mentioned there's a couple of significant things here. Most all of it is the same until you get down to rental equipment for government, Monroe County, and then there is a new line a little below that. That is rental equipment for Monroe County projects. That is a result of the IMA that we signed earlier this year with Monroe County Parks. Monroe County Parks is putting a significant investment into several of their parks. And a lot of that work is in the form of roadway and parking lot upgrades. This year, that line right there is actually going to top out at $176,000 worth of additional revenue on this year's budget. So next year, preface this, we did a lot of work for them this year, more than I anticipated coming into it. Probably stretched our limits a little bit on it to do the 176. So next year, my plan going into it would not be to do quite as much. So we put that line in at 100,000. And obviously, having that brand new revenue line that we feel is going to be there next year helps this fund in general when it comes to the equipment expenses and that type of things. On the equipment rental, other governments in Monroe County, that's our typical DOT work, which we've always had a IMA for. That has been tracking last year and this year higher than we budgeted, so we increased that revenue by 25,000. Sale of equipment, that's the line that I mentioned is starting to creep up. Years past, that's been 20,000, 40,000. That's because a lot of equipment that we're either sending to auction or trading in is significantly, it's older, it's got a lot of hours. Now we're starting to get a few pieces mixed in there that are only 3 or 4 years old, under 3,000 hours, the price goes up significantly. This year on that line, we estimated 110,000. We had one traded piece that we used that was less than 4,000 hours. It came in at 90,000 on its own. Just one out of the 5 pieces we're planning to sell. So significantly higher than we budgeted. Hoping to see that trend continue to help balance out this section out and allow us to keep high efficiency, low breakdown time, I guess, equipment running in the roads. The next one is the CHIPS funding. That's the funding that we get from the state annually. We are, as costs continue to increase, we adjust how we use that money a little bit. This year, we increased that line by 100,000 again to help offset equipment costs and continue our program there to improve and get on a better track as far as resale and overall expense. So that was the last big change in those towards the bottom there. Next section of the budget, that's it.
Want to talk about the transfer?
Yeah.
The highway park town fund uses the equipment, which is owned by the highway townwide fund, to do permanent road repairs, snow removal, leaf pickup, etc. So there's actually a charge between the two funds of $500,000. It's transferred from the highway park town fund to the townwide fund to compensate this fund for the use of that equipment, since the equipment is purchased within this fund. Stereo bonds, pretty flat year to year, lease will mature in about 5 years from now. Employee benefits again, which are really flat year to year. I think there was some extra budgeted in here in 2022, so we're trying to bring that closer to reality. And now we want to raise by taxes, which is down about 100,000 year to year. It's all said and done. Revenue are up significantly. Part-time?
Yeah.
Really part-time.
So highway park town, there's a lot of different sections in here. The first section you'll see is another employee compensation section for the work that's done under this fund. That is up slightly, again, step increases, and then the result of the 2 additional employees, there's a portion of that in there also, but not too significant across the whole expanse. Then right after that, there's fuel. We put an additional $20,000 in for fuel, I believe that would be enough, only because I think we increased by $20,000 or $40,000 last year. So there has been a huge jump, but we did start to take a bite out of it last year. We're going to take another bite this year. It's very hard to tell exactly how that's going to track or which direction it's going to go, but we did increase it slightly. I think that would be a reasonable amount to carry us through 2023. I hope we keep getting more feedback on that every month, but right now it seems like it would be appropriate. Go down to the next section. There's compensation for capital improvements, some of our highway stuff. A few of these sections, we just noticed that more time was being spent in them. That's the increase there. That's not a necessarily a step increase thing. We might use some more hours aligned to that. The chips for road materials. So we do a lot of the general road improvements, including the capital improvements under this. Materials are up significantly. They're up another 10% this year. They were up at least 10 to 20% over the last 2 years. So we're probably 30% more than 3 years ago. So we're going to shift some of that CHIPS funding that we get from other agencies to start to cover the cost of these materials. Everything from our chip seal program, which is our preventative maintenance program, to our capital improvements, which is the full-on street design that you can see on Hightower Way right now, which is replacement of gutters and pavement, basically curb to curb, all brand new. All of those materials are significantly increased, a minimum of 30%. So as some of the lines you'll see for materials when you go down through are kept fairly flat, just because we have limitations with the budget of how much we can increase. We're having to offset with this CHIPS fund. So you see that go up from 8,000 to 100,000. It's to cover material costs, primarily within these sections. Even with that, there will probably have to be quantity reductions in 2023 as far as our programs. The cycles we're on in different things with a 20 to 30% increase in the last 2 years and a 2% tax cap. And it doesn't really do any good to increase these budgets amounts so we have more material if we don't have the people to put it down. So we're trying to stabilize the employees so that we have enough staff to definitely cover the winter and to be able to do this work. Once we have the staff balanced out, we could begin to look at budget increases to increase materials to get the quantities back up. But bottom line right now, with the restrictions, we're going to have to reduce basically lane miles of road in order to keep this anywhere near. As you can see with some of these values, they're too large to increase by 10 or 20%. So that's a big challenge right now with making sure we don't have roadways that start to deteriorate faster than our current programs allow. But we're continuing to work at it. The guys are working really hard to get stuff done. They've done a great job this year, like I said, the additional work we took on the county, getting everything within town, taking care of it, addressed, overtime and all that type of stuff. They've done a fantastic job making that happen. But with the dollars and cents of materials cost, it's going to have to be reduced moving forward, at least in a small amount for at least now. Hopefully we can work out of that. So then we're going to fall leaf pickup season. In there, you'll see the labor increased. Just based on last year's end of the year data, we need a little bit more labor in there to cover that service. There was a lot of overtime last year though because of all the leaves falling late. We actually went 7 days a week for a few weeks there, just because all the leaves came down all at once. It was pretty late in the season. We didn't want to leave anyone out there that we had to. So that's the leaf pickup section. Snow labor slightly increased. This past winter was pretty snowy. This past winter we had a lot of instances that we talked about pretty heavily where it's snowing, so we go out there with salt, and then it just snows a little bit, so you don't see a ton of accumulation, but in order to keep it from building up or icing up on the roads, our trucks have to be out on the road doing preventative work that caused quite a lot of labor cost over the winter. So that's the slight increase there to try to account for that if we should see that type of weather pattern. Move down to services to other governments. Those are going to remain pretty much the same. Those are compensation for different things that we do for Monroe County, election needs. A couple of these, they are starting to adjust at the county and state level. as far as the compensation they provide to us by a certain percentage, because they do understand the fuel costs and different things are going up. So some of those lines are starting to slowly adjust to account for that, as you can see. Employee benefits, Paul, that's more.
Employee benefits, we actually kept them fairly flat year to year overall, but retirement actually started to go down a bit based on projections. Discount flat. Hospitalization, as I said, there's an increase, but this budget line in 2022 had some excess in it, so we can actually budget a decrease even though we're expecting a 15% increase, if you can follow that. Retiree medical insurance, the highways had quite a few retirements in the past year or two. So retire with many of them retire with health insurance benefits, so it's driving that cost up. Even though that retirement medical insurance has been rebid recently, so we're seeing some relief on the premiums, but we'll see how that plays out. The revenue section, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is where the other portion of sales tax revenue is credited. 92% is being allocated to the highway cartel fund. So we're budgeting $4.4 million. As I said, it is trending up. So right now, every department's benefiting from that increase. That would speak to some of these other revenues.
Yeah, so a few of these, it's going to be very similar reasoning to the revenues that we saw in the other fund. The first line there, that increased by 100,000, services to other governments, our Monroe County DOT work. They seem to have a very healthy budget for work. This year, we're working on 7 projects with them, primarily in town, State Road, Lake Road, gravel road, some projects big, some small. But based on the trends we're seeing right now, that should continue. So we increased that revenue number by $100,000. This year, we'll exceed that by quite a bit. So I still feel like 200,000 is conservative. We kept things pretty much the same. Labor to others is sometime internal here to the town. Don't find that we were tracking quite as high for that number, so we reduced that. The kind of snow and ice is being consistent in both those lines. That next line there, when it's 25,000 that didn't exist last year, that's the other portion of the Monroe County Parks work. It was also significant this year, which we're working on capitalizing right now. So I have it in there very, very conservatively for next year, but it does tie into the fact that I don't want to do quite the same amount of the quantity. But that particular line this year is going to be realized at about 178,000. So we put in for 25,000 next year. It should be very conservative. And again, it does help this revenue section and the fund overall. To some of the stuff we're facing with cost increase for operation.
There's the other side of that $500,000 transfer that we spoke about when we were discussing the highway towing fund. Expense in the highway department. Actually, overall, since sales tax revenue was increased significantly, current budget has the amount to be raised by taxes actually dropping by about $500,000. Just take 3 years now.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to do questions on that section.
No, I just had a question regarding, staff applications. I know there's a lot of competition out there, generally for highway workers and that sort of thing. And I talked to the workers about starting wage salary. You've got, as a resource right now, it's $16, $18 an hour. What do you see as far as your applications go coming anyhow? Based on your starting hourly rate?
We We did a couple of things last year, before that starting rate. We had current contract is 4 levels of laborers. The 4th level was down in that $16 an hour range where we're starting people, and everybody starts, gets in the door, because nobody coming in has experience with Webster Highway, so you kind of start building your experience into that way. Last year we made an adjustment mid-year due to basically being understaffed, that those budget lines had dollar values in it, so to help curb that, we put together a package and a plan where we increased everybody internally up 1 step to move to the 3rd step instead of the 4th, so that we could start hiring at that 3rd step. That jumped it to, at that time, I believe, we're around $20 an hour. And I think we're up over 21 now with that same step due to the COLA increases year over year. So we're at about 21 where we're hiring right now. We're getting an all right response. We're getting folks that want to work for the most part. The people that are coming through with skills already that don't have to be put together are very little. Where at a time, I think we were hiring $21 an hour, you were getting experienced labor that probably had at least a couple of years of experience in the field in some way, shape, or form. Now you're really not seeing that. I think if you have much experience and whatnot, there's places where you can go a little higher than that. We still have a very good merit program. The contract the way it's set up now allows these people to develop skills and move up higher than I think 95% of places can get you. So you might be able to start higher now, but you may stay there at that level for a long period of time, where we have a predetermined system in the contract that allows you to move up. So,
I'm sure that helped out a lot.
yeah, it was.
Because it was very low.
It wasn't done for no reason. It wasn't done for face value. It was done because you had an application to do it. 100%.
Great move.
Yes, it was a team effort. Supervisor and everybody else to get that together, Paul especially, to make that happen, and it has helped. We still have quite a few applications. During the summer, not so much though. A lot of the people in our field are working. They have a job, they're set, they're happy with it. They're probably not going to send an application. Over the winter, people tend to make transitions. Right now, I need to get some more people in the door and are ready for winter. So I don't like to have the option to wait as long as when the big pool will come in, but we'll continue to try to capitalize that in the off-season and be ready for the next year. But it's kind of always a long lead time process, especially when we're training you guys to plow. That takes at least 1 season probably to be efficient. It's a much longer lead time when we do the hiring.
You're only running one guy in those plow trucks.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
A lot of places are running two. They have a wing.
Yep.
The village has a driver and wing.
Yep. Yeah, that's the way everybody was for a time, and now a lot of the places have started to transition away from it. And it's probably a good thing they have, because if you had to have 2 people in every truck, I'm not sure what we do at our scale and size. So it'd be even tougher to have bodies in there. So, this is good.
Okay, thank you.
Drainage, yep. So the most significant section of drainage is labor. Our drainage program, we've gone through a lot of different stuff with it, but the bottom line with that is there's more labor needed. We need more people, more bodies working on these crews in order to put a bigger dent in our list of projects, whether it be maintenance, general improvements, any aspect of it, stream restoration. Pretty much everything we do in drainage, there's just a dramatic need to do more of it. So we're increasing the labor this year to include another employee. So that's the reason for the big jump there, is to put another dedicated employee in that section. And everything else through there, we're staying pretty much on track. And then employee benefits, we saw some of those adjustments.
Same thing, based on history. Yeah, remember we got really flat year. It's up. 124,000 a year, monthly raised by Texas.
Okay.
We have increased the number of units
you're getting to that.
Yes.
Go right ahead, Paul.
Yeah, we increased the number of units. It had been in the range of about 11,000 because we're looking at putting together a townwide drainage district. We're bringing more units, rightfully so. Which will provide to additional labor.
Correct.
The rate per household is still around $40.
Yep, which is actually a
Seems nice.
slight decrease to last year. It was 42 last year, so by adding a house, we were able to decrease it slightly. We came in and did the presentation on the townwide drainage district with Max, so that's actually on the website that somebody can go and review if you want some more detail about what Paul is talking about. But the broad strokes is there's currently 78% of the town in a drainage district. We pay a fee annually to make sure that your property, surrounding areas, roads, and everything are able to drain all the way to the lake. So it's our major water courses throughout the town we have maintenance on. So to have 78% of our residents paying and 22% not, this doesn't make sense at this point. All of the drainage from their property is close to the same places. So it really makes sense to have our consolidated district cover all of the residents at this time so that we can better address some of the issues that.
Yeah, and I mean, over the next month or so, the legal process and public hearing and all that, Charlie's not here to talk to it, but we're assuming it'll move forward. That's why this tentative budget proposal shows 100% of the residential units and consolidated townwide drainage system. So just in case anybody watching at home, like, hey, wait, how'd you pull that off without the legal process? We haven't gone through the process. We will. Stay tuned.
So your drainage labor went from in 2022, 200,000 to 316,000. 2023, that's one employee?
No, that's the lion's share of the two. So you notice the decreases. So we did that based on the increase of houses and the rate per house that we just said. So there's a certain amount of increase based on the townwide that's going to go in here. We utilize all that for labor. So 2 employees is more like 120 to 130,000.
Yeah.
So that.
I know you said one employee.
Yeah. So the difference between the 116 increase there and 130, the 15,000 is put into those other compensation lines to net the two.
Yeah, clarification.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
Yeah, you don't necessarily have people completely dedicated to drainage. It could be a mixture of people.
Not 100%. Yeah, there's folks that spend the majority of their time on it, but yeah, nobody's 100% dedicated.
So this could be a mix of town and people including kind of drainage.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, that 116,000 increase you see there is just that many more hours
Yeah.
that we can dedicate to the current staff.
So you can't say that these five employees.
No, that's
a mix.
Yeah, that's an oversimplification
Yeah.
of how that'll actually function. Yeah, to say that it's one additional or 1.5 additional employees, you're right, that's an
Your employees can
oversimplification.
work on 5 different expense lines in a day across 3 different points.
Yeah, yep, and our admin staff down there does a great job of keeping track of it, so it's in the right place, but yeah, they're not very often doing the same thing. Right. I'll give them a little too. That's that last section.
Yeah, and it's, like I said, actually, Councilman Abbott is not with us tonight. The Councilman Abbott, Pat, Paul, and myself have been in a couple of meetings already that is about this 2023 budget, so I don't have any questions because, boy, I'll tell you, Councilman Abbott, he comes to play in those meetings, doesn't he?
It does. You get a lot of questions right out of the way.
Yeah, but he knows his stuff.
Yes.
So I now know my stuff with that experience. Turn me down, Jim.
I'm fine.
Thanks,
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks.
Thanks, man.
Very good. Well, we seeped over a little bit, but now we're gonna see if we can run the communications room for this while Karen comes out from behind the white curtain and presents. This is gonna be interesting.
There's really only two major changes to my budget for next year. They are my pipe dreams that I would love to get but don't expect to. But I wanted to at least start the conversation. One is the technician salary line. Right now I only have two, I would call them stipended volunteers. They do under 4 hours a week, if that, just helping you out with odds and ends, mainly on the publicity side and the video production side. They're not technically part-time staff, or full-time staff, so they do not have any town email address to where we can give them access to help me with the website or any of the social media platforms. So they are very limited in what they can do. It's pretty much just the video production side. But it's been an issue over the years of I have no backup. If something happens to me, if I have an emergency, there's no one that can really do the job in my place. So, going down the line, future thinking, that will need to be addressed at some point, if not this year, then hopefully within the next year or two. We could at least maybe get part-time, one of them up to part-time level. Other towns that are similar to me in terms of the cable department have cable production assistants, either full-time or part-time, so that is the civil service title that we could utilize to just have, basically give me some support. Mainly it's just a backup. So if something happens, I have someone that can run the website, social media pages, and the TV channel. I'm not there. So that's the biggest addition is for my budget is that technician salary line, and that's just for one full-time staff. I currently have one of the, not even part-time staff, that has the television production degree and background to where that person could transition to full-time. They have the background to do the civil service. The other main addition is under the website design and maintenance, and that is adding $14,000 for a complete redesign. We are very overdue for that. It should be done every 5 years. Our last one was done in 2016. So we are very overdue for one. If it doesn't happen this year, then it needs to happen eventually. The $14,000 covers a standard redesign, so it's not the Taj Mahal redesign. It's a very simple one. But it also adds in 2 specialized department pages for Parks and Rec and Police. Those are our most visited sites, and so we really want to make them into standalone pages. So this would give them a very unique landing page design that stands them apart from the rest of the website. Other towns do similar specialized headers, and it's really a nice design. It would give them a lot more flexibility with all of the tools that they currently have on the website, because their departments are much more robust than some of the other ones in terms of how much is in there. So that accounts for a standard redesign, 2 specialized department pages. It also gets us into a 5-year contract so that we're not taking such a big hit every couple of years that we want to do a redesign. So this starts us on a payment plan that in another 5 years we would have a redesign paid off already. The last time they did this in 2016, they did a standalone payment, which is why we're not currently on a plan for renewals. So I would like to get us on one so that we don't have such a hard hit to the budget when we want to do a redesign 5-6 years in the future. So this accounts for that, starting the annual payment, which would be about $2,000 going forward after this initial payment. I've started the redesign process already with our vendor. It's going to take about 6 months just to do the audit of the entire website. It's about over 60 pages in a spreadsheet of all the things that need to be addressed and fixed, and so that's going to take easily 6 months. So this is not going to be a quick process. So if we
can't get to it next year, then definitely we'll be ready in another year to do it. The last component of this website redesign will be changing the URL address. Currently, the ci.webster is just way too long. We already pay and own other URL addresses, one of which is websterny.gov, which is what we would switch to. But we currently have the ci.1 as the main routing address for the town, so we would need to change that routing process, and that's all part of that cost. But we would not make that change until we do a redesign, because it would be a complete rebranding process, and we would not switch it without doing both at the same time. So that's the two biggest adjustments. The other equipment line is going to account for some changes in this core group, getting rid of the big screen and moving to individualized projectors on the board table for each board member, and having tables on this end for applicants to do presentations, where it would just be all broadcast to screens around the room. So that's more for planning and zoning, that is factored into the equipment budget for next year. Go a little more high tech. Yes, one will be over there. But you'll have screens in front of you as well.
That's
So, but that's it. Everything else is pretty much the same. A little bit of increases based on just materials costs, but other than that, everything else is the same. So those are the only two big asks for this year.
Getting that?
Yeah.
Oh,
There they go. Ladies first.
Well, anyway, I would like to, first of all, recognize you on what wonderful job you do on the website. People take that and posting for new events and everything on it, and what it took an hour, you should do a good job.
We've been trying to do a lot more with the upcoming events and community groups, and it seems to be, based on the website analytics, they're doing really
I
well.
encourage them to send it to you. I think you put them all out there.
Yes, I'm getting a lot more community news and events, which is great for news and events.
How does the website redesign go? So I understand you're working with an outside firm. As far as the decision as to what that final design is there any like collaboration with any department heads as this process is going on?
Oh, yes, it's, the actual design process is a good 5 months. And it will be collaborating with every single department to get their needs addressed for this redesign. It's not a quick process because of
I
that.
understand it's going to take a while. I just want, my concern, my question was, there's going to be more than one person involved in making that final decision.
Yes.
But I'm glad to hear that other department heads will be involved in that design process, though.
Yes,
So they will be
especially
collaborative.
especially Parks and Rec and Police, if we do those specialized department sections,
Right.
they will be the ones making those design choices of what buttons are in the middle that are most highlighted, what sections they want, because there's options for putting new sections first or calendars first. There's a lot of different design choices that will be made by them, because they know better than I what the residents want from their site. So that will all be part of the design process. There's actually, it's like a 5-month process of every single step. And there is a whole section for just art design that will be all of those department-specific choices that will have to be made, yes.
Thank you very much, Karen.
well, because we've been here since 4:30, and believe it or not, in about 40 minutes, we have to have another board meeting, our regular board meeting. I want to tie this all up to the workshop portion, so we have about a half an hour break, so people will be here until 8:30 or 9, and have a little dinner.
Thank you very much.
But I'm going to try to tie this up real quick with Karen. And I got to tell you, this will be fun because I get a chance to do a little, the spin that you see out on social media. The bad news is the budget proposal is 64% increase from last year. Wow, what a shock and awe that Karen's budget is 64% more than last year. And the good news is that's only $60,000. So the reality is this, where Karen comes in and says, this is a wish list, pipe dream, I don't think it's going to happen. I got to tell you something, I want that to happen. I've said for 2.5 years we need to put a premium on communication in this town and how we interact and communicate with our citizens. So Karen, I don't think it's a pipe dream. I really don't, as she chuckles. So we'll work with the board on that. So that's all I would have to say about the tying up of Karen's presentation. Karen did something that I really appreciated. She came to me about a month ago and showed me a 20-page PowerPoint that really was the why. And I like that. Here's the why. Don't just show me that you want to increase your budget by 64% and $60,000. She said, here's why. And it made a lot of sense. She saved us doing a 20-page presentation tonight. Thank you, Karen. But I will be working with the board if they haven't already seen that presentation and all, because as we move forward in this budget process for all the departments, there are things that I just think we really need to stand firm on getting. And I think having a full-time communication person, that's important. And that's essentially what you're pitching there. Now, for the budget as a whole, now that we've gone through these 2 workshops, and I'm going to defer to Paul on this one to make sure what I'm asking or saying is not inaccurate. All the department heads have now presented. The budgets that they have presented as of August 4th, these are not adopted. But these budgets aggregate up to the point that if we can increase from last year, Paul, about 600,000 taxes and stay under the 2% state tax cap. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right now is this aggregate budget of all these departments at an increase of about $1.6 million.
That's right where it's at.
Okay, so I'll try to make this very simple. We either say, okay, everybody gets what they just showed. And if it's $1.6 million, I would imagine we go about 8% on the tax rate.
Yeah, it's about 8%.
It's an interesting proposition in today's day and age with inflation and all that. So I think we have a lot more work to do